This is Jason Anderson, Chairman of the Killenly Town Council, and we are calling this regular Town Council meeting to order. At this time, we'll open up in prayer. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us here safely this evening. We just ask you for your guidance, your wisdom to make all the right decisions for our residents, businesses, in the town of Killenly. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For roll call purposes, all council members are in attendance except for Mr. Grandelsky and Mr. Gambatista, who are both absent with notification. We'll now move on to item 5, adoption of minutes of previous meetings. Can I get a motion to adopt 5A, special town council meeting, March 9th, 2024 minutes, 5B, regular town council meeting, March 12th, 2024 minutes, 5C, special town council meeting, March 26th, 2024 minutes, 5D, special town council meeting, April 2nd, 2024 minutes, and 5E, special town council meeting, April 6th, 2024 minutes.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Ms. George, seconded by Ms. Barclay. Discussion, corrections, comments?
I had one thing, but I don't know which one it was, to be honest. The guy who was running Gorka, does that sound familiar? Do you guys know? I'll look through it. Can I bring it up later? It said I know what it was. He was selflessly has donated to the community. It was one of those awards, and it said selfishly, like there was a typo in the thing.
That's not good.
It was a G, a name with a G.
All right, we will make sure that gets corrected in the minutes. Thank you. Any other comments or corrections? All those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
I found it too. Jeff Crocky. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now move on in the agenda. Next item up is 6A, proclamation recognizing and supporting the Town of Killenly Constabulary, Connecticut State Police, and other law enforcement agencies. Whereas establishing a civil society requires a collaboration between the citizens of that community, law enforcement, and prosecutors, and whereas policing in American communities is a stressful, sometimes dangerous, and a highly technical vocation in which officers know that their every interaction is being photographed, filmed, or audio recorded, and can be subject to public and media scrutiny. And whereas the public often draws conclusions regarding an officer's actions without the appropriate awareness, knowledge, or education of the circumstances of the incident. And whereas full support of communities and elected officials are necessary for law enforcement officers to do their job safely and effectively. And whereas increases in crime occurring as a result of law enforcement disengagement will be stemmed only by a clear and concise message to law enforcement that when they do the right thing, they will be supported by the citizen community, law enforcement leadership, prosecutors, and elected officials. And whereas in 2023, there are 137 line-of-duty deaths in the United States, as of May 1st, 2024, there have been 51 line-of-duty deaths in the United States. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Killenly Town Council does hereby recognize the extreme danger that comes with the chosen profession of law enforcement. Each day, when the men and women of our law enforcement agencies put on their uniforms and equipment, they are accepting the responsibility to serve and protect the lives and property of their communities at all costs, which could include their life. We recognize that we live in a time of great turmoil where the trust between many communities and law enforcement agencies is at an all-time low due to political and civil unrest. We recognize that despite this, the fine men and women of law enforcement report to work every day to uphold laws enacted by federal, state, and local governing bodies. We recognize their dedication to the town of Killenly, the state of Connecticut, and the United States of America. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killenly, Connecticut, this 14th day of May 2024. And I will add that this really means a lot to me, having a sister who served for 28 years and was forced into retirement due to an injury she sustained on duty. Next proclamation is item 6B. Ms. George.
Thank you. Proclamation recognizing May 2024 as the National Military Appreciation Month. Whereas the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness enumerated in our Declaration of Independence, secured by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and enjoyed by every citizen of the United States, are secured by the dedication of the members of the United States Armed Forces, and whereas the sacrifices made by all members of the United States Armed Forces and their loved ones are to be valued. The brave men and women of our community who have served and are enlisted, being ready to defend our homeland and safeguard the freedom and values for which we stand, deserve our recognition. And whereas National Military Appreciation Month, NMAM, is celebrated every May and is a declaration that encourages U.S. citizens to observe the month in a symbol of unity. And NMAM honors the current and former members of the U.S. Armed Forces, including those who have died in the pursuit of freedom. And whereas the month of May is characterized by 6 national observances, which highlight the contributions of those who have served. Loyalty Day on May 1st, Public Service Recognition Week, May 7th to the 13th, Victory Day in Europe, VE Day on May 8th, Military Spouse Appreciation Day on May 12th, Armed Forces Day on May 15th, and of course Memorial Day on May 29th. And now therefore it be proclaimed that the Killingly Town Council does hereby recognize May 2024 as National Military Appreciation Month as a symbol of unity to recognize, honor, and support the commitment and sacrifice of current, former, and fallen members of all branches of the United States Armed Forces. Killingly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killingly, Connecticut, this 14th day of May, 2024. And we thank them all for their service.
Thank you, Ms. George. Ms. Wakefield, if you would do 6C, please.
Proclamation recognizing May 2024 as Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas there is a proven connection between good mental health and overall personal health, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also affects how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. And whereas mental health is foundational to our wellness, allows us to care for ourselves and others, and make valuable contributions to our communities. The lack of mental health awareness leads to devastating impacts on the well-being of individuals. The stigma and fear of discrimination keep many who would benefit from mental health services from seeking help. And whereas severe mental illnesses are more common than cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. More than 50 million Americans struggle with mental illness. Mental illnesses can affect people of any race, age, religion, or income. It is a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, and ability to relate to others in daily functioning. And whereas the month of May is characterized by 7 national observances that frame Mental Health Awareness Month, Children's Mental Health Acceptance Week and National Prevention Week are May 17th to the 13th. National Mental Health Awareness Week is May 10th to the 16th. World Maternal Mental Health Day is May 3rd. National Silence the Shame Day is May the 5th. And National Mental Health Provider Appreciation is May the 12th. And World Schizophrenia Awareness Day is May 24th. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Killingly Town Council do hereby recognize May 2024 as National Mental Health Awareness Month. We call upon all our citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental illnesses, reducing stigma and discrimination, and promoting appropriate and accessible services to all people with mental illnesses. Killingly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killingly, Connecticut, this 14th day of May 2024.
Thank you, Ms. Wakefield. And Mr. Cotul, would you mind doing 6D, please?
A proclamation recognizing May 2024 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. Whereas the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Motorcycle Safety Foundation have named May as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. Motorcycle riding is a popular form of recreation and transportation for thousands of people across the state and nation. Motorcycles are a common and economical means of transportation that reduces fuel consumption and contributes in a significant way to the relief of traffic and parking lot congestions. And whereas the campaigns for Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month 2024 consist of motorist awareness of motorcycles, ride sober or get pulled over, rider safety, and share the road. These campaigns assist riders and motorists in the reduction of motorcycle risks, injuries, and fatalities. It is the responsibility of whoever puts themselves behind the wheel to have the same respect for a motorcycle as for any other vehicle that they share the road with. And whereas state and motorcycle organizations across this country will be conducting a variety of activities to promote the importance of motorist awareness and safely sharing the road with motorcycles and remind riders to make themselves more visible to others. And whereas the Killenly Town Council wishes to promote the safety campaign of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in their effort to ensure the safety and well-being of all. And whereas all roadway users should unite in the safe sharing of roadways throughout the town of Killenly, Wyndham County, and the state of Connecticut to follow the rules of the road so that all citizens will remain safe. And now, therefore, it be proclaimed that the Killenly Town Council does hereby recognize the month of May 2024 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month and urge all motorists to join in this effort to keep our roadways safe. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated Killenly, Connecticut, this 14th day of May 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Petula.
Thank you.
Next item up is item 6E, proclamation recognizing May 2024 as National Bicycle Safety Month. Whereas National Bicycle Safety Month was established in 1956 and is a chance to showcase the many benefits of bicycling. The bicycle is an economical, healthy, convenient, and environmentally friendly form of transportation and an excellent tool for recreation and enjoyment. And whereas throughout the month of May, bicycle use increases with good weather, many enjoy experiencing bicycling through educational programs, races, community charity events, or by simply getting out and going for a ride. And whereas the town of Killenly roadways and trail systems attract bicyclists each year, creating a bicycling-friendly community has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, quality of life, and growing the economy. And whereas education of bicyclists and motorists regarding the safe operation of bicycles is important to ensure the safety of all travelers. Bicycle safety includes proper functioning of the bicycle, a helmet that fits correctly, wearing bright or reflective colors, riding in the rightmost lane when no defined bike lane is available, obeying traffic signs, lights, and lane markings, and being always visible. And whereas bicycle safety education is important to reduce collisions, injuries, and improve health and safety for everyone on the road. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Killenly Town Council does hereby recognize May 2024 as National Bike Safety Month and encourages participants to observe all safety measures, including wearing a helmet and obeying traffic laws. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killenly, Connecticut, this 14th day of May 2024. At this time, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is 6F, presentation from Paul Williamson on Key Capture Energy Battery Storage Project.
Mr. Chairman, would it be wise to move item number 10, appointments for boards and committees, A through G, ahead of this?
I don't see any members.
I don't believe that you have any individuals here.
Do we have public comments tonight?
After
Public
presentation.
comments will be after, further on in the agenda.
Do we want to move that? Is anybody open to that, or no?
Well, my thought is if we're going to have a presentation.
They
allow the
could talk
public to hear the
about that, yeah,
presentation, They can
okay.
make their comments.
All right,
afterwards.
thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for having me, and I appreciate the invitation to come and speak with you today.
Is your microphone lit up green?
It is lit up green. There we go. It was stuck to the table, so I couldn't quite get it close enough.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Paul Williamson. I'm with Key Capture Energy. Key Capture Energy's home office is in Albany, New York. I personally live just south of Portland, Maine. And we have a number of interests here in Connecticut, and I'll be speaking to you about some of those interests, but most pointedly about a project that we're working on developing in Putnam. And so just as a quick note, I'm going to go pretty quickly through the early parts of these slides, the introductory parts. I understand that most of you have listened to some other presentations about battery energy storage and are pretty familiar with it. And so, but real quickly, the company was founded in 2016. Again, we're in Albany, New York. We also have offices in New York City and also in Houston, Texas. And we have approximately 100 people who work for us right now. And we have just over 600 megawatts that's in operation or in construction. And most of that is in Texas and New York. And we can go on to the next slide, and we can go on to the next slide too. That's Texas and New York. The benefits of energy storage is enhancing power reliability on the system, servicing peak demand. And so as you have an increase of home heating through electricity, electric vehicles, or just industry moving into an area, you can reduce the cost of infrastructure by putting in battery energy storage to help respond to peak demand when it happens. And then one of the greatest impacts is it allows a greater penetration of renewable energy. And we're seeing a rapid growth of that all across the Northeast. Go to the next slide. In New England, we have interests. Our largest portfolio, as you can see, is in Connecticut. And we also have 4 different projects that are now underway in Massachusetts and 3 different projects that are underway in Maine. The projects in Connecticut are really the most advanced, mostly based on policy that's established by the state of Connecticut. We can go to the next slide. So I think you've seen much of this before. This is basically what an energy storage project looks like. And the picture at the top of the screen there is SunGrow system, and it's their first generation SunGrow system. And then the picture that you see at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the technology is rapidly evolving. That's SunGrow's second generation battery energy storage. One of the things you can kind of notice from the top and bottom is in the top, you can see on the ends of all of those units, there's an HVAC system, a fan that's located there. As the systems are becoming more refined, the HVAC system is all now contained in most of the systems that we're dealing with, and so you don't have an exterior fan like that. That black stripe along the top of the container is actually where all the air exchange comes, and it's included liquid cooled system. And SunGrow, Tesla has a similar system as that, so does Canadian Solar, and those are all primary companies that we work with. Go to the next slide.
Just on that, with regards to that, what's the impact on the, noise level, having it in interior versus exterior? What are you seeing for a change on that?
Sure. So most definitely it's a reduction in noise impact because having the exterior fans, and we'll see this in some of the other pictures as well. Some of the units used to be, the cooling units used to be on top, and that would emit a larger amount of noise. Putting them on the end helped reduce that, but now having it all interior reduces that even further. Additionally, now this varies depending on what kind of model you go with. There's an increased number of models that are putting inverters within the containers themselves, and inverters are really the largest producer of noise. And so the inverter is going to make kind of a buzzing noise. If you've ever walked past a substation or even underneath your transformer on your cool summer night, you've heard that noise. Sounds kind of like a mechanical cicada. But when you put them in concentration like this, a large number of them within an area, then it can generate a higher level of noise. This is what it looks like if you open up all the doors. And each one of those little briefcases is a group of cells of batteries. And I think that you've been all through this, but I'm going to take an extra second just to kind of explain. Inside of one of those cells, if you open it up, you're going to find a number of smaller cells, or one of those black boxes, you're going to find a number of smaller cells. And it's a mineral material that's very much like, if you took rolled lead. and you roll it with toothpaste in between. Toothpaste is the dielectric gel that helps convey the moving electrons, and then that lead-like substance, that or aluminum foil-like substance, is the minerals that include lithium and cobalt and some other minerals as well. And so it's really worth pointing that out because when people envision large batteries, the first thing they think about is the battery in their car, and it's all full of that sloshing lead acid. If we go and we puncture these batteries and we try to squeeze them really hard, it's going to get hard to fill up a Dixie cup full of gel. So they're not swimming in a whole bunch of toxic chemicals that are just waiting to come out. And if we made a mistake and we pierce those with a forklift when handling or something, you're not going to see a rupture where a bunch of liquid spills out. So it's really worth noting that. We can go to the next slide. Again, this is much of what I was just describing. And we'll go on to the next one. This is one of our more recent projects in Texas. This is a 50 megawatt project, and it's worth looking at this because this is very similar to the same size that we're proposing that we'll be doing in the town of Putnam. Go to the next slide. So if you don't mind, can I stand up and kind of point at the screen a little bit? Or is it better if I stand? Well, I can see that
would be,
somebody has a. Okay, yeah, okay. Well, you can see the line that goes kind of diagonally across the bottom there. Yeah, that line there. That's the town line between Putnam and Killingly, and so our project would be just north of the town line, located in there. And access to that would be from Malloy Drive, and Malloy Drive just goes north. That's the International Paper Company. That's just to the upper right of our project. The Killingly substation is where you can see the cursor. The one we're going into is that's the 115 kV side of the substation right there, and that's where we'll be going in. Oh, no, you were in the right place, but the black box, that's where our battery project is. So our power line will be going south, crossing the town line. The property just south of the town line, part of it is the property that's owned by, that we have under a purchase option. And then right there where the hand is, that's the state of Connecticut DOT property. And we have an easement from the state of Connecticut. So our line would go south through the state of Connecticut property over the Providence and Worcester Railroad and into the substation there. And we can go to the next. Correct. So the development cycle of one of these projects, and again, I think you're pretty familiar with this, but first thing we do is we identify places in the grid that would benefit from having a storage project by doing a number of engineered studies, and then we also start looking at land availability in those areas. We identified Killingly substation actually as a good location for energy storage back in 2018. The project was originally founded in 2018. The property that my predecessors had identified and secured was across Park Street on the other side of the road. And they had contemplated doing a 200 megawatt project coming into the Killingly substation at the 345 side of the substation. Through further studies, as we were working with the independent system operator for our interconnection studies, we ran into limitations going into the 345 that would require some expensive upgrades that the project couldn't afford to perform. And so we reinvented the project once I came onto the company in 2021, and I inherited the project, reinvented it, looked and saw what was possible, realized that the property that we now have is much closer to the substation, had less complications involved, and by going into the 115 kV side of the substation, we avoided some of those complications and also reducing the project substantially. The original intention was for approximately a 200 megawatt project. By looking at the engineering studies, we identified that 45 megawatts would fit very well. So, and then the largest part of going through any one of these processes is the interconnection process. we filed a new interconnection request with that revised project size and specifics in 2022. And typically, in most situations, we'd be done with the interconnection study by now. But over this last year, the independent system operator has been going through a series of reforms that they're enacting this summer. And that basically means that in October, we have to almost go back to square one and start our studies all over again. So our studies for this project will be fully complete by October 25. And so that's kind of pushed us back about a year and a half on where we want to be with the project. And then once we get fully into that interconnection study part of the process, then we'll also complete doing all of our environmental surveys on site. We have done an initial critical issue analysis, and we've done vernal pool surveys and wetland surveys on site. But we'll do a full array of all of the permit required studies this coming summer and fall with the intention of submitting our permit application just about the turn of the year. Typically, when I'm managing a project, I do everything I can to see if I can get my permit approvals all in at about the same time that I'm getting all my interconnection approvals in. It's good to kind of line those things up at the same time. So that's what we're off and doing. We can go on to the next slide. So again, I think I already discussed all of this verbally, but on this image here, you can see number one, that's the property that we have under purchase option. Number two is the state DOT property where we have an easement. And then number three is Providence and Worcester Railroad, and Providence and Worcester Railroad has issued us 2 different crossing licenses. One license is for doing both communication lines and power lines over the tops of the railroad tracks or above the railroad tracks. And then the other is for a redundant communication line underneath the railroad track. Eversource requires you to do redundant communication lines with these projects just to make sure that if anything goes down, both the substation and the project can continue to communicate. And that has to be on an alternative path. Putting it on the same pole obviously doesn't make sense because if you lost that pole. So that's our full site control issues right now. The Providence and Worcester and DOT agreements, they're actually waiting in my office to be signed, and they're just going through our legal counsel's final review. Once we sign those agreements, we'll be fully complete with our site control for the project. Moving on to the next one. So permitting for these projects, any project that's over 1 megawatt in the state of Connecticut goes to the State Siting Council. Any project that's under 65 megawatts can petition for a declaratory ruling, and so this project fits in underneath that hat. Actually, I had a chance to talk to John LaMontagne. John LaBelle. Thank you. Earlier this week, and he was asking me questions about the permitting process, and I admitted to him that the difference between the more robust permitting process, if you're above 65 megawatts or under 65 megawatts, really isn't all that great. The major difference is that if you're over 65 megawatts, the Siting Council will host a public hearing. If you're under 65 megawatts, they'll look at public sentiment and also public need and decide whether or not they want a hearing. Pretty much all the rest of the work that you need to do, the environmental permitting studies and everything else, are standard and the same. One thing worth noting, our company has been successful in permitting 3 other projects in Connecticut. And so through the Siting Council, we have the 3 first projects, battery projects that we're permitting in Connecticut. Those projects are located in East Hampton, Windsor Locks, and Willington. So we've already done our vernal pool and wetland delineation studies. We'll do wildlife and botanical studies this fall and summer and fall. We've already consulted with Connecticut NDDB, and so we're aware of the different concerns of what species might be on the property. Cultural resource will be conducted this summer. Geotech surveys will be done in October, and those inform both of our foundation engineering as well as our stormwater runoff management plan. Sound and visual studies will be done in October. And then we will submit to our application Q1 of 2025, most likely. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, at this time, it's questionable. We originally had not expected listed on there. Just several weeks ago, we did a wetland delineation, and we found some additional wetlands where our access road is going in. And so that might push us over the limit because we'll be disturbing some of those limits, and we might need to have an Army Corps permit. So then, of course, with Connecticut Siting Council, the DNM plan, we'll have the stormwater discharge permit with CT Deep. And then once we get all of our other approvals in place, then we'll come to the towns and we'll submit applications for building and electrical permits. Next slide. There we go. So safety considerations, this is something that we take extraordinarily seriously. I mentioned that we have a number of projects that are already operating in New York and Texas. Our New York project is actually the first project to ever operate in New York State. And we've been operating now for over 5 years, different projects, and we have not had any safety incident at any one of our projects. So management of the system is extraordinarily important in that all of the systems that we deal with go through all of the testing that you see listed here. One of the most important tests that's raises a lot of concerns with communities is what is the risk of fire. There's now a UL test that's required for battery energy storage, where if you in the UL test they basically force one of the cells to overheat and catch on fire, and then you have to demonstrate that that fire is not going to propagate to other cells. And so all of the systems that we work with now pass that test in particular. So we can move on to the next slide. So part of the emergency response plan, part of the Connecticut Siting Council application will include an emergency response plan, as we've done with the other communities where we've permitted projects. Before we submit our application to the Siting Council, we will submit our emergency response plans to local fire departments and emergency responders. And so we'll be doing that both to Killingly and Putnam. We'll also be consulting with both departments before we file that as well to see if they have any other communities that they would like to have us include. And we'll be seeking comment on that emergency response plan. The plan itself is a living document, and so we go through that and we continually update it. We'll end up update it several times before we even go into construction. We'll get further feedback from the communities as we update that. Then once we go into operations, on an annual basis, we go through and we update that plan and continue to learn better lessons and create better behaviors and coordinate with the communities as we do that. Moving on to the next slide. Communication with local emergency responders is extraordinarily important, and so we start that process early. We'll be hosting initial meetings where I and a couple of my colleagues will be coming in and just establishing a relationship and rapport with local fire departments. But then before we actually go into construction, we will host a training with local fire departments. Then between going into construction and before we turn on the project, we'll host another training, and then we do an annual training with local emergency responders every year going forward through the whole life cycle of the project. The fire or the emergency response plan will be provided to the fire departments for them to keep on file at the stations. It'll also be accessible at the location of the project itself. And the projects all have a battery management system that tracks the record of everything that's happening within the batteries. And on site, there's a panel where you can access that information. There'll be training about how to access that information, as well as all of the systems are remotely monitored. And so they're being monitored 24/7 both by human and also by automated means. And so there's a human backup at all times with all of our systems watching the automated systems. And so it's a redundant system to make sure that everything continues to operate. If at any time one of the cells or parts of the system are not operating properly, they can isolate and shut down that particular cell, that portion of the project, or shut down the entire project remotely immediately as needed.
Where's your remote office?
So the remote team is a contracted office, and it depends a little bit on which units which brand unit, whether or not it's Tesla or Sungrow. Right now, we're using two different companies. One is located in Nashville, one is in Houston. For this project, I'm not entirely sure where they would be located, if they would be the same as one of those or a different one. And we can go on to the next slide. I already talked about the remote monitoring and emergency response system, the fire panel located that aggregates all the data from the batteries, and again, 24/7 monitoring. So we'll have regional technicians that do maintenance on all of these. And so right now we have a number of different technicians that are working in the state of New York. Typically, the technicians work in teams of two. Two technicians will manage somewhere between 3 to 6 different projects, depending on their size and their location. So when we first initially start building projects in Connecticut, we'll probably have technicians coming just across the border where they're located in New York. As the portfolio in New England continues to expand, and again, Connecticut would be our first place. We most likely would be hiring regional technicians coming out of Connecticut. As our portfolio expands in Massachusetts, some of that labor might be shared across the border between Massachusetts and Connecticut. All depends on, where the projects are located and how many are operating at the time.
I'm sorry, you probably said this, but for a technician, how many sites would a technician be assigned to in general?
3 to 6 sites.
3 to 6.
Yeah. And again, usually pairs of 2 technicians. When everything's operating as needed, there's approximately every other month a technician might come and do some maintenance, and then there's a full annual maintenance for the entire system. So there's not a lot of traffic that's created from the projects. Quite frankly, when we're developing a project, I know that we've chosen a good site, and we've done it well when it's out of sight and out of mind. The next slide, please. So emergencies do happen, and so when there is an emergency situation, the general course of action is first and foremost is to isolate the area of all non-essential personnel. If there is somebody who's located within the footprint of the project, if they're able to be extracted safely, then that would be one of the key things to do. If they're not, then we would need to look at some other type of action to see how we could extract that person safely. Generally speaking, unless there's a life-saving operation that has to happen within the footprint, emergency responders are trained to stay outside of the footprint of the project and not go inside. That just increases the opportunity for them to get into more dangerous situations. And so they would respond to the outside. The only medium that we recommend using is water, so there's no chemical medium that is suggested to be used. The water is used as a cooling agent only on the surrounding areas. Water is never put directly on the cells themselves. That actually can exacerbate the problem, make it worse. And so the general response is to contain and control.
Are we waiting until the end, or we just ask? I'm sorry, Jason.
You can ask questions as we
Yeah,
go
I'm
on.
happy to have you ask
So
questions as we go.
The cell panel, which is like a fire panel, is on the inside or the outside?
It's on the outside.
Okay.
Yes. So all of the important information, anything that needs to be accessible, including an override shutoff, would all be located outside.
I do have one question. In the event of a fire, is there any electrocution risk for emergency personnel, anyone in the area? I work with high voltage batteries, being in the automotive industry, and I know we have things like we've got the fiberglass shepherd's hook, where And that's why I'm really glad to hear you're having 2 technicians there, because if something were to happen, you've got somebody to be able to pull them off to break contact.
Right, right, and so that's where I was talking about. If there's an injury or somebody who needs to be evacuated from inside, making sure it can be done in a safe manner, and that would be one of the situations. Is there still contact that exists, and using the right procedures. If the emergency response personnel stay outside of the project footprint. And again, assuming that none of the power lines have come down, if the power lines have come down, then similar to any other power line coming down type of situation, need to avoid that area. But outside of the fenced area, there should be no risk of electrification. I think we can go on to the next slide. So in regards to chemical spills, I had mentioned earlier that in the battery cells themselves, there's a gel that's used, and as long as you don't flood that cell with water and flush out the gel, then there's really no risk of fluid spill there. The cooling system does use ethylene glycol, and so ethylene glycol, it does dissipate when it's in the environment, but when it's immediately released in concentration to the environment, can be considered a hazardous substance. However, all of the units that can contain ethylene glycol have emergency reservoirs that are well over 100% capacity of the amount of liquid that's contained within the HVAC system. And so it varies a little bit depending on the brand, but I mentioned the Sungrow earlier. They have 160% containment. And so if all of the hose rupture and all of the liquid drains out of the system, it would be contained within the container and not released. The other possibility of spill with the battery energy system is with the inverter oil and also the transformer oils. The medium voltage transformers and inverters that we use all use the F3 vegetable oil as a coolant oil. And so typically that does not require a secondary containment. Our larger main power transformers, occasionally we use a synthetic or a petroleum-based oil for a coolant oil. And those all have secondary containments, again, greater than 100% of the fluid that's contained within the system. Quite honestly, the biggest or the greatest risk and opportunity for there to be a chemical spill is during construction, and it's not from the battery energy equipment itself. It's actually from the machinery that's used on construction. And so a ruptured hydraulic hose with a crane or an excavator, something like that, fluid spilling from a truck, something like that, is actually a greater risk at most times. We keep our SDSs always available on site. And again, that would always be part of the training that is available to the emergency responders. Next slide. And then probably should move the slide up because this is actually, first and foremost, all individuals who are working on site during construction and operation go through general trainings to avoid trips, slips, and falls. Make sure that we use safety equipment to avoid any contusion type of injury, hard hats, safety vests. Arc flash is always a risk when working with batteries, and so all personnel are always wearing protective clothing to protect against that. We keep AEDs on site. Everybody's trained in AED and CPR. And so we have a very, very strong safety culture at the company. And again, both all of our contractors as well as our individual employees. If during construction or any time like that, any of you decide to come and visit, and we offer up a time for you to come and visit, then we would have clothing for you to wear when you come, so that you would be wearing all of the same PPE at the same time. And I think that brings us to the end. If we go to the next slide. All right. Questions?
I will open up to council members if you have any before I start.
How does this affect us?
Couple of different ways. Number one, it's going to be working in the general grid, and while you're not going to see it personally in the way the power comes and goes from your house on a day-to-day basis, it is going to provide stability to the greater grid. It's also going to be providing more renewable energy, making it available at times for you and all of your neighbors to be using that renewable energy at 8 o'clock at night after the sun's gone down. But
This is a courtesy presentation?
this will partially, it's because we are on the town line and also because we have a power line that's going from the project through Killingly. I reached out to the town of Killingly and I said, we want to bring you guys up to speed. Quite frankly, I'm remiss. We've been talking to the town of Putnam since 2018 about this project, and I probably should have come and visited with you much sooner than this.
For full disclosure, they did have a virtual meeting with town staff. I believe that was
Last week.
Yeah, last
Thursday.
week, last Thursday, I think it was, or something like that, yeah, Wednesday. And that was in just some of the town staff, like the fire marshal, building official, they're not always able to attend evening meetings like this. So we had the land use staff, the fire marshal, and the building official department receive the same exact presentation that you just received, so that way they could better understand the project itself as well.
And Andrew, just to finish my answer as far as how it affects you, I'm also aware that there's a fair amount of coordination between the fire departments, between Putnam and Killingly, and so that has an effect, and we want to make sure that we're coordinating with both departments equally.
So who's your parent company? Who's the?
SK, which is South Korean company, bought Key Capture Energy in 2021, in October of 2021.
And you had mentioned that the EMS has to stay outside the fence.
Well, we train them to stay outside the fence, and we instruct them to stay outside the fence because going inside the fence, there's nothing really for them to do inside the fence. Again, unless there's an emergency situation where a person needs to be retrieved from inside the fence.
So they can go in.
They can, yes. Yeah.
I've got a couple questions. In your presentation, you talked about trying to locate these near existing substations. What is the advantage to doing that?
Well, one of the major advantages to doing that is you reduce your interconnection costs. And so if when I've worked in a variety of different renewable energy settings, 10 years ago when I was doing an energy project, if I just followed the line and I found a good spot to do it, it was actually cost effective to do that. But because of the cost of materials and equipment now, it's now more expensive to do that than it is to just go into a substation. And so you save a fair amount of money. It's almost half the cost going into the substation versus tapping a line. When you tap the line, basically you have to build your own, it's called a 3-ring bus, which is kind of a mini substation. And it's pretty costly these days to do that. So that's one of the reasons. And then the other reason is you can have a little bit more of a thorough indication as you go through your engineered studies and tests on the performance going into the substation.
One thing I had read, I believe it was, trying to remember, it was one of the ISO New England reports, talked about trying to locate battery storage on site of renewables, stating that was the most efficient place to have it. And I know having it next to the grid, there is also an advantage to that because you can pull off the grid and charge back to the grid. And I guess what I'm looking for is a little bit of explanation. I know you had talked about cost-wise as far as scaling down from the initial 200 megawatts down to the current project size. Other than cost-wise, were there anything else that came up in the studies as far as there not being a need for something that big as well, or?
No, when we had gone through that, we had a part in our study where there was going to be a substantial upgrade required on the substation and part of the grid, basically a bit of a line that needed to be reconductored. And it was going to be too expensive for that size of a project to be able to make that investment. And so each project, the size of the project matters, your location matters. It varies quite a bit depending on the effect that it has on the grid. And at that particular time, going into the Killingley substation 345 bus at that location, it caused those effects that were too expensive for the project at 200 megawatts. When we went back at it, the engineering firm that I work with frequently that does kind of the preliminary studies for us, I went to them and I gave them a series of parameters, and I said, tell me what's the largest size I can get in there by, also avoiding these other consequences. And they came up with, an interesting scenario where they said, we could do well over 200 megawatts, but we wouldn't be able to participate in all markets. And then if we reduced the project to 105 megawatts, we could participate in 2 of the 3 markets rather than just 1 of the markets. And then if we reduced to 45 megawatts, we could participate in all 3 markets. When I first put in the interconnection request for this project, I put it in at 105 megawatts, where we were going to run energy only at 105 megawatts, and at 45 megawatts, we were going to do energy stability and capacity. We kind of, and then we investigated that for a while, and we realized that that bifurcated project really didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was going to be hard for me to make market sense with that type of a project, so we reduced the entire thing to 45 megawatts.
Can you just speak to a little bit to the 3 different markets, exactly
Sure.
what those are for?
The 3 different markets are frequency regulation, capacity, and energy. And so energy being the most simple one of those, you'll often hear it referred to as energy arbitrage. Basically, you're buying electricity when it's robust on the grid and it's not in high demand. And so hopefully you're buying at a lower price then, and then you're selling it at a time when it's in higher demand, and so hopefully it's a higher price. The New England market is a little bit, it's got a number of controls on it, so there's not a large delta between the on-peak and the off-peak time. So in other parts of the country, you make a whole lot more money at arbitrage than you do in New England. The margins are pretty thin in New England. So the next market then that you fall back on, or you don't fall back, you look at these as kind of revenue stacking to try to make sure you can make all the finances work. The next market is capacity. And to qualify for capacity, you have to go through a more robust series of studies than simply interconnecting with ISO New England. And basically, that additional set of studies, you need to prove that if they need you to come online at a specific time, you can come online and deliver. And so once you've proved that, then you can go into what they refer to as a forward capacity auction, and you can participate in the auction to basically commit to obligations in the future. And those obligations, basically, you're putting some money up front to say, we will be there when you need us. And then if you show up, you get paid well. If you don't show up, you lose your deposit. So it's a little bit of a gamble. And then the third market is frequency regulation. And so, it's a complicated grid. It's a lot of generators coming on and off and large users coming on and off. It creates these funny little waves and bumps in the grid. And a battery does a really good job of kind of evening off all those bumps. And so you can do frequency regulation as well. And that's kind of a very small market in New England, but it's, again, you're stacking all opportunities. So that's kind of the cherry on top.
Now, you are a 4-hour discharge?
This would be a 4-hour discharge, correct. We do anything from 2 hours. Right now, the longest system that we're kind of looking at doing would be 8 hours, but a 4-hour system is primarily what we're doing. When I first started with Key Capture, we were looking at 2-hour systems in New England. ISO New England changed the capacity market where you get lesser value for a 2-hour system than you do a 4-hour system. And so in 2022, I and the company made a decision that all new projects in New England would be 4-hour systems at minimum.
And 2 hours the minimum
Yes.
requirement?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Trying to go through, because you have answered a lot of the questions I had. As far as the batteries themselves, where are the batteries manufactured? I know a lot of the batteries are manufactured in China. Are these as well, or are these manufactured stateside?
So the SunGrow is a Chinese company. Tesla is an American company. However, right now they're going through some review to see if they would qualify for a domestic content adder. And so they need to do some additional work to see if they do, because quite frankly, we all know that this is a global marketplace and there's components coming from all over the world, regardless of where you're manufactured. And then Canadian Solar is a Canadian company, but they do domestic manufacturing in the United States. And we're looking at them because it appears as though they may, with the next generation, be able to qualify for the domestic content, U.S. domestic content. So those are the three primary companies. We do have battery systems that are operating with Powin. That's another company that we've worked with in the past. At the end of the day, some of the systems operate, fit the operation parameters that you want better than others do. So that might be one of your choices. And then, of course, price is a choice. But equally as important as price is performance as well, because you want to be able to run these systems seamlessly for 20 years and really be able to count on them. And so, like many things, sometimes saving money up front doesn't save you money over the long run.
How often do you anticipate having to change out the actual battery modules, the cells themselves?
Yeah, so we do. It's only forgetting the term. Right on the top of my head. We do a supplemental process. I can't think of the term right now. It's right on the top of my head. But anyhow, where we actually over-design the sites, and we over-permit it. And so when we permit it, we're going to permit a site, let's say it's going to require 12 containers. We'll permit it for 14 containers, because we'll be coming in and adding those additional containers in the future, somewhere between year 5 and 10. And so basically, as your batteries degrade, if I have a system that I want to have, let's just use easy math at 50 megawatts, and I want it to be at 50 megawatts. When I first build that system, I'm actually going to build it at 55 megawatts. And then over time, it's going to start to degrade. And then once it gets below 50 megawatts, I'm going to bring in another container and add more batteries to it so that it's back up above 50 megawatts. It'll degrade, and I'll come in and add another container. Now, at some point in there, we may need to come out and change out specific units, but that's not part of the overall strategy is to do the add-on as I described, rather than change out entire portions of the system.
Okay. As far as the composition of the batteries, I know there's a lot of different technologies that are coming out now. And one of the other facilities that has been proposed for the area, they were talking about the LFE, the lithium iron phosphate. Is that the same composition as the batteries you intend on
Correct,
using?
the lithium iron phosphate, correct. And it's a much more stable battery than the first generation batteries. If you look on the internet, you can probably find some scary information about a fire that happened in Arizona. I guess it was 5 years ago now. And that was a lithium cobalt battery, much less stable than the lithium ion phosphate batteries. Charge and discharge faster, but typically with the batteries, if you that a little bit of extra time savings isn't going to make as much of a difference. Lithium ion phosphate also has less density to it, so you need a little bit of a bigger footprint. But quite frankly, coming from an area where I worked in both wind and solar energy development, finding space for batteries is really not that much of a challenge, because we can do a 200 megawatt project on less than 10 acres, and 200 megawatts of solar, that would require about 600 acres. So it's much less of a challenge.
I am glad to hear you say that, because that was something I brought up in a recent meeting, how much acreage of solar would be needed for the other project. And the numbers were severely deflated.
Yeah, roughly speaking, it's 5 acres per megawatt. Yeah, 5 acres per megawatt.
Yeah, I think the figures I
Yeah.
saw were 6, but that
Yeah.
might have been. a
Like
year
I
or
said,
two
roughly
older
speaking,
information.
depends on a
Yep.
number of different things. And that's, when I say 5 per megawatt, that's perfect acres without wetlands and streams and other things,
Yeah.
so.
Now, as far as other technologies that are on the horizon, just a little bit, how far do you think they're out as far as like the zinc ion batteries and the solid state batteries? The stuff I've read about solid state batteries, it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, and so we actually have a partnership with Form Energy. Form is a company that is a spinoff from MIT, and they are doing iron air batteries, and so that's extraordinarily long duration. We're talking well over 10 hours into the hundreds of hours, depending on how you set it up. Right now, the cost points aren't in the right place, but I mentioned those ISO New England reforms earlier. For projects that aren't kind of already up and going and moving along right now, because of those reforms, if you started a new project kind of today and tried to kind of go through the process, the earliest you could bring it online is 2030. And so I'm looking at my next generation of projects, that aren't under development yet, the new ones that I add to our portfolio in the coming years, as possibly being with Form Energy. Now, that's not going to be the perfect battery for all situations. In some situations, you want long duration like that. And in some situations, you'll want something that charges and discharges faster. But the iron air battery is really kind of interesting technology. I'm not I'm not an engineer and a technician, so I can't describe it very well to you. But basically what they're doing is they're taking iron and they're forcing it to rust. And when they force it to rust, it gives off electricity. And then they pump electricity into it and it reverses the rusting mechanism and unrusts it.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard of that. I am definitely going to be doing some research into
Yeah,
that.
they're neat people. Yes. It's a better way than saying it than derusting, I guess.
Trying to go over all, because I was taking notes as you were talking. I just wanted to make sure I covered everything.
I got one, Jason, while you look. So, and I might have the terms wrong of the 3
I'll
fields.
be right back.
When you schedule for, oh, sorry.
I have an old grandfather clock at home, and I love to have it run throughout the day, but my wife doesn't like to run it at night because it reminds her that she's not sleeping at 1 o'clock in the morning. And so I have an alarm on my phone to always stop at 8 o'clock and start it at 8 o'clock in the morning.
So when you schedule for the capacity market, we're going to go online and take some of that.
Yeah.
Do you go offline with the frequency part of it?
No, but essentially you can't do two things at once.
That's what I'm wondering. Like,
Yeah.
you're separate companies. The other one seems like it is just a buffer. So the frequency aspect of it, are you going to coordinate with them? Like if those two mines are buffering at all time and yours goes off, it's going to affect ours. Right?
Ours?
The one that may happen in Killingly.
The
Yeah.
other one. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so like how much coordination is there? with
There's,
that?
it's really, so they're separate projects, but they're both reacting to market signals.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I'm thinking more of, the BSS
Yeah.
type communication system.
sure, so with the frequency regulation, you're not using a lot of electricity. And so you can still be available to respond to capacity. You do need to manage, though, if you're operating in capacity and energy, you need to be managed so that you're available for the
Totally
capacity market.
different. Yeah,
The way the capacity market, though, is a day-ahead market. And so right now, the way it operates, 3 years in advance, you get your obligations and you say, I will be there for you in 3 years. But then in 3 years, day ahead, you look at what's needed and then you allot, I can be available that day ahead. And I've qualified to
Okay.
do so.
So there's probably some coordination with ours about the
Yeah, but
BSS
we are,
trains.
yeah, we're not going to communicate between two battery systems.
Right.
But both systems
And
are
there's
going to
an
be able to look at what's
overseer.
happening in the market and respond to market
Okay.
direction at the same time.
Thanks.
Do you have any data on how many decibels of noise that, say, the 45 megawatt battery would emit?
So we don't have that yet. I mentioned that we'll be doing our full sound studies later on this summer. I'm hopeful with that size project and where we're located that we can meet the current sound standard. It's being in an industrial area, so the sound standards there are a little bit more relaxed than they are in a residential setting. But we'll go through the sound studies and see. In Connecticut, we need to meet the sound limit at the property line. And, typically what we try to do is, we do the sound study. The sound engineers provide us with the sound contours that show us either we are over or under that limit. And if we're over that limit, then we go through a series of sound wall designs to put those sound walls. Sometimes they need to go all the way around the project, and sometimes they can just go strategically in certain areas around the project to prevent sound from going certain directions. For example, I mentioned we permitted a project in East Hampton, and we have sound walls there that are about around that project around 3 sides. It doesn't have to go around all 4 sides of the project.
So where you're located, so industrial, what is it? IP is here. And then, so you're near M&M Transportation, that road.
I'm not familiar with M&M Transportation.
Yeah, there's a trucking company right next to that access road.
Okay.
So on that access road, are you set in the back, or are you right off of that road? Because where that station is.
Can we pull up
Because
the?
there's no houses there, that's what I'm pointing
Yeah.
out to you. The rail is right behind
Right.
you. The trucks coming in and out of there are pretty loud already. Then International Paper's running constantly, but there's no homes right there. So that.
Yeah, there are no homes
That sound
there.
mitigation would be different for like where ours would be. Yeah.
Yeah.
The trucks
The
are
mitigation
a
is
lot
a
louder.
sound wall. That's, yeah. And it'll be an engineered sound wall. It uses, use a variety of different materials that are available for that. Most of what we've installed so far has been, they're steel walls with an insulation in between 2 layers of steel. But there's a variety of other products that are available too.
So it's gonna be much quieter than what's already there. That was just my point.
And what's our, well, yeah. When you look at International Paper, the substation being there, the train tracks being there. That being said, if we don't meet the sound standard at the property line, we still have to do the mitigation. Yeah.
Any further questions? So this parcel that's currently zoned industrial,
Correct.
how familiar are you with the ISO New England 2023 Regional System Plan that came out last November?
A little bit familiar. I perused it and I kind of scanned through it a little bit. I read the parts that were important to me, but I can't say that I memorized any of it.
Okay. I just pulled it up because there is one question I have, because there's something in here that kind of threw me off, and I'm just looking to get some explanation as to what they may have meant when they put it. And it's in the portion that's regional integration of wind, photovoltaic, and battery resources. And in the third paragraph, it talks about, and I'll quote exactly what it says, "The addition of more battery energy storage systems to the region could present additional challenges as demand could become less predictable. The interconnection of distributed energy resources within electric distribution systems has contributed to an overall decrease in net demand." I guess my big concern is when they talk about presenting additional challenges and the demand could be less predictable. Any thoughts on that at all?
No, I can't. I mean, I can wildly speculate that maybe because there's a random number of homes that do or don't have solar panels, and some of those homes may or may not contribute to demand at times. But maybe companies are not manufacturing during the typical 8 to 5 time period, but I'm not entirely sure. I will, though, you mentioned earlier a comment on battery energy being more efficient when paired with renewable energy versus standalone. I would kind of offer a counter argument to that. We actually find it more efficient when you have a standalone system, because that standalone system can now service a variety of different resources. And so whether or not I have wind, solar, multiple solar, where, over in this region it's cloudy and over that region it's not cloudy, I can respond to excess energy and time shift it to a more valuable time for a variety of different resources, including hydro and gas power as well. And so a battery energy plant that is independent and at an important place in the grid, which is actually more important when you're located near load, will reduce the cost of infrastructure more readily than putting it at generation, and be able to respond to a variety of generation, and instead of only being able to respond to that one form of generation.
Now, so the voltage that the batteries are basically the rating of the batteries, I'm assuming the batteries are going to be DC. How many volts are the batteries rated for? And then how much energy is lost converting it from DC to AC, and then if the voltage has got to be stepped back up to the grid? Because that was one of the things I was reading where it talked about there was less energy loss by having battery storage facility at the site of the renewables because there was less converting going on.
Right. So that is a reality. So if you have your solar panel that's generating electricity by DC and going directly into your battery, it doesn't need to go through your inverter to do so, and so you lose one of those inefficiencies when you're doing that. I'm trying to think about all of the systems paired together are coming out at 23 kV and then coming to a central point and then stepping up to whether or not it's 115 or 345. And so you have a series of medium voltage transformers, the inverters going from AC to DC, going to a medium voltage transformers, then all your collector lines going to the project substation that then steps it up to the 115 in this particular case.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I do want to thank you for coming forward. I've learned even more about battery storage than I had learned recently, and
Great.
Actually one question that I just thought of, because I'm looking at my notes talking about discharge times. Now, considering solar and being in New England, we don't have a lot of sunlight a lot of the year. Would there be an advantage to doing longer discharge cycles for battery storage facilities where if they're charging off of solar, they can discharge out a longer period of time because we've got less sunlight during, especially the winter months?
Sure, theoretically so, but again, it's all a cost equation at this point. And so if you had, the perfect battery that was available for you for long duration and it costs as much or less than, one of these more rapid batteries, then fantastic. But unfortunately, right now you don't, and so the cost equation really doesn't add up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. One of the things I always like to leave people with as I, when I attend one of these meetings is you have my information, my contact information. Any other questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you'd like me to come back and speak to you again, I'd be glad to do that. At some point going forward, when it's appropriate, we'll probably come forward to the town and see if we can organize just a more open public meeting, kind of an open house sort of a thing. Not so much an official town thing, but more of us encouraging people to come and learn about the project. And if you happen to be, in your drugstore, your local grocery store, and you hear somebody talking about it and they have questions that you can't answer, please share my information with them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We will now move on the agenda. Next item up is item 7, unfinished business for town meeting action, and we have none. So at this time, we'll move on to item 8, citizen statements and petitions. Ms. Caloria, do we have anything submitted?
None were submitted.
Thank you. If anyone would like to make public comment, please step up to the podium and state your name and address.
Good evening, Al Soper, 175 Cranberry Bog Road. Again, you're probably tired of looking at my face from the budget meetings and getting up there and trying to be an advocate for those people who get hit the most or the hardest with the latest assessment and the new proposed budget. My question is can the town council consider using the general funds or some of the monies from the general fund to help offset the increase in the mill rate that's going to affect those properties owners that are going to be hit the hardest with the upcoming, revenue / grand list ratio. That's what my question was. I asked the council to consider that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment? Last call for public comment. Seeing no more public comment, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is council and staff comments. So Ms. Calorio, I know I've had a couple people ask me as far as using, at this point, using mill rate, additional mill rate additional general fund to offset the mill rate. Procedurally, how would we go about doing that if we were going to do that at this point?
So the town council can decide during the time period in which you are setting the mill rate to activate additional fund balance to further lower the mill rate. You set the mill rate after the expenditure side has been set by referendum. The council would have that availability to have that conversation during the setting of the actual mill rate.
Thank you.
So I have a little questions about, because I had talked to Mary about this. So the budget passes, you have 14 days because of the appeal process, right? Because it's an ordinance, and then the clock starts for 10 days. I'm a little bit worried about, can we put it on the agenda and have an action on the same day? Like, I'm worried about the timeline. If we were to have a discussion or.
Yeah, so the setting of the mill rate is always an item on the town council agenda. Generally, it's usually, so it depends on obviously when budgets are passed. So if budgets were to pass tonight, then it would be on your special meeting on June 4th, the setting of the mill rate. That whole discussion happens at that time. In that agenda item. The council would decide to activate whatever additional amount of fund balance, recalculate the mill rate accordingly, and then that would be your mill rate that you set. And we would reflect that modification in the revenue side of the budget. So that's how that functions. So that would be part of it. And so your timeline, you're well within your 10-day time period of setting the mill rate. With the June 4th meeting. Because it's the 14 days doesn't begin until the date of publication. So that 14 days doesn't start tomorrow or the day after the referendum. It starts the date of the notice of publication. So we would tomorrow, if budgets pass tonight, we would then send in publication to the Norwich Bulletin. Generally, the Norwich Bulletin is taking 3 to 4 days for that publication to actually hit the paper. That day that it hits the paper is the day that clock begins, because the public has to have notification of the adoption of the ordinance for them to begin that appeal period.
Okay, yeah, no, mainly I was concerned about the time period wherever all these budgets end or whatever, if it happens on the same day. So a discussion happens, and then if you did do an action or you didn't do an action, that's the same day. So you don't have to have a public hearing or.
No, you
'cause
do
then
not.
it takes
Correct.
everything longer and it
Correct.
changes it.
You would just you would modify the revenue side.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. Any more comments?
I have one. Is it possible for you to put together a couple scenarios if the budget passes tonight for that?
I would take any direction, as always, from the council chair, if he gave me direction, and then I would provide whatever scenarios
Okay.
might be something that the council wants to consider.
How do we do that, Jason? Like not here, or is that later time, or what would that happen?
I can put a request through to her with a few different scenarios, and then she can have time to throw that together and have it ready for the council when it comes time to.
So on our end, we would just wait, or we talk to you before that happened, or?
I
Like,
would
it doesn't
recommend that
happen
you-
here, I'm just trying to
Right, I
understand
would
what
recommend that you voice whatever your desires might be, or your vision might be around the utilization of fund balance to the council chair. I usually communicate directly with the council chair, shortly after the time frame of the passage of the budgets as to whether or not the mill rate, he anticipates the council would support mill rate as originally calculated, or if there would be some other change. He would communicate what he feels is probably the palate of the council for that. So I would recommend that you have conversations with your council chair.
Privately?
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I ask for clarification on something? What exactly do you mean by appeal?
So by charter, the townspeople, anyone, the public can appeal the decision of the referendum. There's set criteria. They have to petition, and it has to meet so many percentage of the number of registered voter, or the numbers of individuals that voted in the last regular election. They can then basically overturn the results of the referendum. So that's why that notice period, it doesn't begin, that appeal period or that petition period doesn't begin until the date of publication, not necessarily the date of the day right after the action occurred, because the notice has to be published.
Okay, and I wanted that clarified because I know what that was, but I
Oh,
wanted the
yeah.
public to hear. And what would the costs be incurred to the taxpayers to go through that entire process if we were to do that, like ballpark?
So a petition is really taxpayer having, or individuals going and getting signatures of registered voters or taxpayers that are eligible to vote in that. The list then has to be confirmed by the town clerk. And then ultimately what that does is it brings us to a reconvened, the town council would have to redeliberate and then go back to a reconvened annual town meeting and then back to a referendum. So right now, a referendum vote is costing us, I want to say, roughly $7,000 to $8,000 each time we go to referendum. So that's kind of that continual cost each time we go. But the actual petition, aside from the staff time of verifying that the individuals that signed it are eligible voters, there's not an exorbitant amount of cost associated with that, but it would trigger a subsequent referendum and process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I have one more. In absence of Ed, I'd like to just say that there was minimal communication with the vote out there. I know Plainfield and most towns have the little signs.
We have the
That
signs
they-
out all around town.
I drove from our house to here and I seen one sign at used to be the old Rotary.
So we have it at the wastewater treatment facility, we have it on the digital sign at the library, we have it on a sign in front of Town Hall. We have it all the way up Route 12, we have it at the 101 and 12 intersection. We have it at Owen Bell, we have it in a lot of places right now. The only sign that we were not able to put out for this one is the digital blinky sign, and that's because currently right now, I know that's not the official word for it, but whatever. We weren't able to put that one out because that one is having programming problems and they have to bring it in for repair. But that's a sign that's not actually owned by the town, that is repaired that's a Region 4 emergency asset. And so that has to go through that process for the repair. So that's the only sign that we did not put out this time around because it's not available for that programming. But we've had all of the signs out, all of the sandwich board signs out at every major intersection throughout town and on every available sign that we could put it on.
And I know the sign out in front of the town hall was out on Sunday, because I did see that on Sunday. When did all the signs get dispatched?
They went out the day after the annual town meeting.
I think my point was, like, if you go through Plainfield, I don't think you could go down a road without seeing a vote sign. And they're cheap.
I did have one of the poll workers say that she was called this morning at 6 o'clock, and she didn't even know that there was a vote today.
Maybe we should form a communications committee, because I know you guys are trying and doing all the things you're supposed to do. And every year we hear the same thing. I know it was a goal a while ago. Like, how do we do committees or something? Like a
Well,
safety committee or
you're gonna be-
subcommittee or
We're
You're
something?
going to be talking about the vision committee. That's on the agenda tonight. It's really about you forming, the council forms what it is, the committee by ordinance and determines, what's the goals, what's
So-
the
so
objectives.
You're saying put it in that discussion? Okay.
If you want the visioning committee, the one that's on your agenda tonight is a vision committee. That's what was part of the goals.
Any other comments?
Did we put it on, was it announced on Winnie?
It was, yes, I was on
And
Winnie.
it's posted on the town and government.
Yeah, it's
Facebook
posted
page.
on the town's page. We
And
also
it's
put it.
on the website.
We put it on our Facebook page. And Tammy and I were on Winnie on Friday. And I think we had to have mentioned it at least 6 times in that hour. And I know Winnie also reposted again today.
Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is appointments to boards and commissions. 10A is appointment of town council member as a regular member for the Cable Advisory Committee.
So I don't believe you have anything in the back with regards to cable advisory. It would be for the most recent, let me look at that again.
Yeah, I didn't remember seeing anything in there. I was just going back to make sure I hadn't missed that. And 5B is also appointment of town council members to the Cable Advisory Committee as a
It's for-
alternate member.
It's for your current terms, because you can't exceed your current terms as council members.
So the term would run from, what is the start date on the term?
Well, you could just make it for May
Today's date
1st.
tonight, okay.
Because,
All right, so the start date on the terms would be May 1st, 2024, and they would run to November 30th of 2025. I know Mr. Whitehead had expressed interest, as well as myself. And I will open up if there's anyone other than us that wanted to take those positions, that we can have discussion.
Do we have to make a motion for you guys, or it's already there?
you would need to do a motion and just fill in who on the regular and who on the alternate in order to be able to have it on the floor.
I make a motion for Jason Anderson and Andy Whitehead to be on this committee, and we'll discuss, we could alter the motion if somebody else feels really eager about it.
And I just want to clarify, are you making the motion to have Jason be the regular member and Andy to be the alternate, or vice versa?
That would make sense.
Should we have a discussion? Do you guys have a preference?
For me, it's extremely easy because where they meet is the Montville Town Hall, and it's 3/4 of a mile from where I work.
And our shop is a Norwood, so
Yep.
it works out good.
So for Jason to be the regular and Andy to be the alternate, I make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Ms. Murphy, seconded by, I believe, Ms. George was the second. Discussion?
Good luck.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Congratulations.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, and we'll move on to item 10C. Dana Hopkins is seeking reappointment to the Agriculture Commission as a regular member. His term would run from November 1st, 2023 to October 31st of 2026. Mr. Hopkins attended 1 of 2 meetings in 2024 and attended 5 out of 7 meetings in 2023. The Agriculture Commission currently has 7 alternate member vacancies. Can I get a motion to reappoint Mr. Hopkins?
I believe that's only 3 alternate member vacancies. You said 7.
Yeah, it's 3.
That would be a lot of alternates.
It's like, they got a problem with quorums, don't they?
Make a motion to renominate Dana Hopkins to the Agriculture Commission.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula, second by Ms. Wakefield. Discussion?
Can I just make a note? I think the reason, when it says 5 out of 7, they didn't have meetings every month because they didn't have a quorum. And this, what, they're like really getting going again. They have a fantastic board. So, yes, fully support this.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on. Next item on the agenda is 10D. Rodney Galton is seeking reappointment to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission. As a regular member, his term would run from May 1st, 2024 to April 30th of 2027. He attended 4 out of 5 meetings in 2024 and attended 11 out of 12 meetings in 2023. Inland Wetlands Watercourse Commission currently has 1 alternate member vacancy. Can I get a motion to reappoint Mr. Galton?
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Barclay, second by Ms. George. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is 10E. Kevin Thompson is seeking reappointment to the KB Ambulance Board. As a regular member, his term would run from May 1st, 2024 to October 30th, 2026. Mr. Thompson attended 15 out of 17 meetings since his original term started in January of 2023. The KB Ambulance Board does not have any vacancies. Can I get a motion to readopt Mr. Thompson?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Ms. George. Discussion?
I think Kevin's background in finances is a good fit for that as they're restructuring and realigning a lot of their organizations. So, and he's got a lot of experience on boards and so.
Thank you.
He's the chair, right? Isn't he the chair? Yeah. Yeah, he's very, very good for that board.
Thank you. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is 10F. John Ogden is seeking appointment to the Public Safety Commission. There are currently 5 regular member vacancies and 2 alternate member vacancies. The regular term runs for 4 years from May 1st to April 30th. What would be, okay, down here further, May 1st of 2023 to April 30th of 2027. Can I get a motion to appoint Mr. Ogden?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Ms. Barclay. Discussion? I will say I'm glad to see that we've got interest on the Public Safety Commission, seeing how we have no members on the commission right now, especially considering how there may be a need for having members on the Public Safety Commission, considering we're looking into reevaluating the midterm, short-term, and long-term goals of the constabulary. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to item 10G. Jared Peachy is seeking appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals. As a regular member, there are currently 1 regular member vacancy and 3 alternate vacancies. The regular term runs for 5 years from February 1st, 2020 to January 31st of 2025. Can I get a motion to adopt Mr. Peachy?
I'll second it.
Motion has been made by Ms. Barclay, second by Mr. Kurtula. Discussion?
I'll just make a general comment that it's nice to see that our boards and commissions continue to have residents coming out to volunteer and fill them.
I agree. It is so important to have all these volunteers. Without the volunteers that we have on our boards and commissions, it would be extremely difficult to conduct the business of the town. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on in the agenda. Next item up is item 11, reports from liaisons, Board of Education liaison.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Nice to be here. Sorry, it's been a little while. So I'm going to be coming from now on, so you can expect me to be here more often than not. So the Board of Ed, just at the last meeting, I don't know if you've seen them, but we're doing board shout-outs, just kind of a little thank you to certain people, certain groups in the schools, and people have really responded to it well. So it's been a nice thing to have there. As far as other committees, there was a ad hoc committee for the mascot that has been formed. They have had 2 meetings, and we're still waiting for what's coming out of that. So not really sure at this point. The other ad hoc committee is on district-wide bullying, and their first meeting is coming up on May 20th. So that is an open meeting if anyone wants to attend. I believe it's at central office, but you can contact us if you need more info on that. As far as the mental health, you folks were doing Mental Health Month. We did just enter a MOA, Memorandum of Agreement, with a new Director of Mental Health to take over the position that Ms. Cody had left. And the name of the person, I didn't write it down, it escapes me, but I believe she was the vice principal at KISS, and she's moved into that slot. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. So that position has been filled. On curriculum, the administration, starting with Dr. Nash, they are working with a proficiency-based learning, and they're trying to streamline things so it goes from pre-K all the way through high school, so that each grade it progresses. It just kind of folds into the next section, so it's not starting it all over again. You go 1 through 4 in this area, and then 5 through 8 in something else, and so it's streamlining the process. And so then, we've just been having fun with the budget like everybody else. So I did bring some, I had the administration put together a couple of lists of audited budget surplus history going back 10 years, just for you folks to look at. And then I have a list of expenditures that have been done with the non-lapsing account going back to 2016. So I just brought these along for you guys to look at, to have as you deliberate going forward, as we're deciding on the reimbursement to our non-lapsing account coming up, I think is June 4th is that meeting. So I brought this along for you. I'll pass them out. Any other questions? Be kind, I did volunteer to be here.
While we're speaking about the non-lapsing, and when I reviewed the MOU recently between the town council and the Board of Ed, there seems to be a few things in the MOU that need to get cleared up, just because of the wording of it. There's a part in there that talks about a report on the account that's supposed to be presented to the town council, but the Board of Ed doesn't have that account. It's actually a town account.
Right.
That was one of the pieces. There were a couple other things, wording in there, just to kind of clean it up and clarify it, so, and that is something I would like to see done, just especially looking at that and the way it was worded.
So who would work on that?
I was going to be working on drafting some revisions around that and then transmitting over to the superintendent for
Over
them,
to
for
Dr.
her to,
Nash.
Dr. Nash, for her to
Okay.
also communicate to the Board of Education.
Great.
Thank you.
So, Kyle, you know, I had been reaching out to the administration and the board about a possible conflict of interest with Missy Murdoch sitting on the 10-4B negotiations team with the school and also being a complainant. So she's both a defendant and a plaintiff. And has legal given us any answer to that?
None. And we did, I think you were there the night when, the last time the council was there, and we tried to ask some other questions directly while he was sitting right there, and he wouldn't answer the questions without a direct say-so from the board chair, and or a vote on the board as a whole, and they voted it down by the majority. So,
Okay, could you just bring that concern
We'll
and
pass
say,
it
we-
along.
people are still asking?
yeah,
They're
for sure.
asking me.
I understand.
I mean, there must be some reason why they're allowing it to happen, and I don't understand why we wouldn't publicly say this is what we feel about it and why.
Yep.
Any other comments?
So can I get clarification? So a plaintiff on the 10-4B complaint is sitting on the Board of Education, which is fine, but she's also a defendant because she's on the board, and she's privy to executive session information on the 10-4B complaint.
You're correct.
As well as being involved in the vote on what attorney represents the Board of Ed in
On
regards to the
all of
complaint.
it.
No, negotiations, they're negotiating a settlement.
Yes, but she was
So,
also, she
yeah.
was also
No,
involved in the
absolutely.
hiring
So
of the
how is
attorney.
that not even being addressed by the state of Connecticut themselves? Like, you can't be a plaintiff and a defendant. Like, how does that work? And that's.
My understanding, it was a complaint would have to get filed with the state.
So how do you file that? How come you guys haven't filed a complaint? Or have you, I'm asking?
We've voiced our concerns about it, but as far as, I mean, we don't have an attorney that we could use to, we would have to ask
So
that
this could
attorney
be a
that won't speak
citizens
to us.
complaint type
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
that could file,
Yeah,
kind of like what they did originally.
right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Agreed.
I just want to hand these out. If you could just. So I had Dr. Nash, I had asked her about doing this, and she got these together for us really quickly. Actually, it was the business office and Christine Clark that threw it together.
Yeah, she was working very closely with the finance director
Yeah, so
in working through these.
I thought it was pretty cool how she put it all together like that, so to see it.
So Christine is back?
She is back
Part-time.
part-time at this point, but yes,
Oh, send her our best wishes.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting a target on your back.
No.
That was so nice.
No problem, no problem. I enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is 11B, Borough Council Liaison. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is 12A, discussion and acceptance of monthly budget reports. Can I get a motion to adopt the summary report on general fund appropriations for town government? Motion's been made by Ms. Barclay,
I'll second.
second by Ms. George. Discussion, comments, questions?
I just had one question, Mary. When I was looking at the budget, and I think it was the permits came out like a lot higher this year. Where does that extra money go at the end of the year when the actual is more? And I mean, I know it probably just goes back to the general fund, but do you remember the question I had about starting a special fund to offset the mill rate ahead of time? And you said, no, we wouldn't want to take from the general fund to do that. Would that be different if we took from money that was going back to the general fund? Like, say we took some of that extra money that went back and we put it into a special fund to offset the mill rate?
Right, so, we'd have to walk through the GASB requirements around tax stabilization funds and stuff like that. In general, the funding, any additional
Jen's in
revenue.
the door, too.
Yeah, I know, it's reserving fund balance, but you would have, you would take the, so the revenue here, any excess revenue, that goes in totality in revenue, would go back to fund balance, so general fund balance. The town has utilized fund balance to offset mill rate in the past with the communication that you knew that your revenues have been exceeding your budgeted revenues over a period of time, and it was sustainable, right? So when I first got here in 2008, the town had been regularly utilizing in their budgetary process $800,000 of general fund balance because revenues had been outpacing the budgeted revenues, and there were turnbacks on largely Board of Education side that was offsetting the use of that $800,000, and we could demonstrate that over, year over year. And even if we were to utilize the $800,000 every year for a period of 4 years, it wouldn't put the fund balance in a detrimental perspective, right?
What I'm trying to understand, though.
I understand you want to create a separate fund.
Yes,
I get that.
that's the part.
I get it.
Okay.
However, you run, so
It's not.
it's counterproductive to create a separate fund to divert revenue to another fund for the offsetting of mill rate. You could just utilize the same,
Okay, so you don't think there's any difference, I'm just trying to understand it.
there's not a benefit.
Taking the surplus.
It's looked
you know,
the
that
same.
Before it gets there,
Right.
it's not less of a
It's essentially
penalty
looked
or
the
whatever.
same, right.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So I just got handed the budget votes. So both budgets failed. Town budget, yes votes 294, no 381. No too high was 358, no too low was 13. Board of Ed budget, yes votes was 298, no votes 375. No too high was 351, no too low was 27. We had a total turnout of 6.3%. Total turnout was 6.3%, or 671 votes. So what does that mean? At this point, we will be, so the annual town meeting will be reconvened for June 3rd. The town council will need to deliberate at some point between now and then to reset numbers to go to that reconvened annual town meeting. At the reconvened annual town meeting, no motions are made, no changes are made on the floor. Whatever is set by the council will be what goes to referendum vote. And that'll happen on June 11th.
Thank you.
And if you want to pass
Any
that
more
around.
comments regarding the item on the table, which is 12A? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on. Next item up is 12B, System Object Based on Adjusted Budget for the Board of Education. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made by Ms. George, second by Mr. Cottula. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Move on in the agenda. Next item up is 13A, Town Manager's Report. Ms. Gloria, if you could.
So just to review the results of our bond issuance, we did successfully maintain, Jen, I'm like echoing. We did successfully maintain our AA+ stable outlook credit rating, which allowed us to have really good results with the bond issuance that we just sold for $10 million. We received 9 total bids. The successful bidder was FHN Financial Capital Markets, and we had a TIC, or total true interest cost, of 3.4%, which is a very good interest rate in this market. We did so when they submit their bids, they're submitting on a competitive basis. So they will sometimes go in and revise their bid, and that usually results in them offering lower interest rates and also a combined premium amount, which means they have an upfront amount that they pay the town to essentially buy our bonds, right? So they sold at a premium of $650,000. What we decided to do with that premium was we utilized it to resize the bond. So in other words, we lowered our debt amount. We still received $10 million, but we lowered our overall debt amount. So that way, number one, we're paying less interest over time. So we actually took out a loan. Our bond is actually just over $9.3 million in totality, and by resizing the bond, it provided long-term interest cost savings of a little over $700,000 over the 20 years. So I did attach S&P's credit determinations. That way you could kind of see their methodology on maintaining our AA+ and what they saw for strong performance, which is really the long-term planning that Killingly has had, especially around our reserve funds. And the very, we were able to articulate the deliberation that the council goes through in the utilization of, Jen, now I'm off. Am I there yet? I don't know what happened. Am I there? I'm on? Okay, now I'm on, because it wasn't on just a minute ago. Okay. So, so you can see kind of what that deliberation was and what their overall outlook was of our financial portfolio. I had a meeting with SEC TV, Southeastern Connecticut Television Studios. They're located in Groton and Waterford. They're a nonprofit organization, and they're looking to really provide more public access to TV media and programming. So what they really were looking to do is be able to grab our YouTube postings of our various meetings and re-air them and include them in their scheduling for re-airing. No cost to the town, so gladly we grabbed that. So I'm waiting to get the scheduling of when they can work ours into the overall scheduling. But that would basically be on Breeze Lines, channels 24 and 25. And once we get that schedule, we'll be sharing that out on our social media as well, so that way people will be able to, know when our various, so they're going to be starting with the town council meetings, and then they will pick up like planning and zoning and other meetings that we currently stream live. And so all of our meetings that we stream live, we then subsequently, a day or two later, we repost them to our YouTube channel. That's where they would grab from. So I think just provide extra coverage for that, or exposure. The homeowners program and the elderly freeze program, application periods are still open until tomorrow. People can still submit applications for those. We did put a social media push out on this, so that way anybody who maybe was unaware of the programs, we did try and get more information out there. The River Trail, we're underway with construction for that River Trail phase 5. So I just gave you a couple of pictures of some of the vegetation. They're starting to kind of clear that trail path. This will be a continuation of the existing river trail. It will be paved in the end. So, but they are, starting to just bring back that vegetation so we can get that trail installed. And they're making good progress. They did have some, we did have some pretty wet weather, and so it's pretty mucky and muddy out there. But they're working through it. Chase Reservoir, the forest management plan. We did have a meeting actually Friday, so after I had published this, with Joan Nichols. She is a licensed forester. She also works with the USDA. And we reviewed what their action steps were. So I did include the forest management plan, the forest management outline that she did for the Chase Reservoir. And really, she broke it into 3 areas. Priority Area 1, which is really where there has been substantial decay and disease through all of the trees. There's probably 80% deforestation right there right now, or dead and hazard trees at the moment. Her recommendation is to literally just get the trees, the dead trees, down on the ground. Don't even try and remove them. Just put them down on the ground. Just get them down. None of the trees are worth anything in that area because they are so heavily diseased and dead. So it doesn't make any sense to do any type of salvage out of that. Or even remove the trees at that point in time, remove any of the stock, just get it all down on the ground. So we kind of talked through what that might look like. She did have Rob Thurber there. He's a harvester, he's a logger, he's a certified logger. I've worked with him in the past in Putnam, but he really has a very significant eye towards the health and well-being of the forest, not just what's merchantable within the property. And so, we also, as part of that meeting, was also our highway department, our highway director, our town engineer, and our land use department to really, fully understand potential impact. So we'll be working on trying to get those trees down. It's unclear yet. Matt has to go back out there with some of our crew to determine whether or not we have capacity to, number one, have the time to invest in going out there to do that. They have a number of other large projects on their plate for this summer, but also whether or not equipment-wise, we feel that we have enough safety protocol in place in order to be able to do that safely. So while we have a number of staff that have worked with tree companies, and but it's very different to be going into a area like that where you're felling trees versus dealing with a roadside tree. It's just a very different operation. So we want to make sure safety is priority. So we're working through what needs to happen in area one, which is largely, so if you look at the map, she has them outlined. And then along the actual path, the trail, we would be removing any dead or dying or dead or hazard trees within probably about a 30-foot spans off, 30 to 40-foot spans off of the trail to eliminate those, substantial hazards of fall. The next area that she has identified is priority area 2. This is the white ash area. The ash is still merchantable. However, it is infested. Once it's infested, you have 6 months, about 6 months to a year to get it out. Otherwise, it loses all value and you no longer have merchantable material. So what the next steps would be for the town to engage in a contract to have that area, it's about 30 to 40 acres, inventoried. So the ash trees would be physically tagged. Any other hazard trees or dead trees would also be identified for removal. We would clean that area up at the same time. We would remove the ash. That's going to require a logging landing area to be established. So highway and engineering would work on identifying a spot or a location as to where that could potentially safely be occurring, and then how the logs could be removed. The town would receive revenue from that. That would largely offset the majority of the other work that has to be done. And then once we get to that phase, priority 3 is, we have a very healthy oak and white pine forest area. And step 3 is really to develop a forest management plan for the entire property, right? She did not recommend doing a forest management plan from the get-go. That's going to take, potentially up to a year or more to develop a full plan. In that span of time, we will lose any merchantable ash, and you will have just a bunch of dead wood that we have to remove out of the forest anyway. So she really felt, this priority area 1 is very critical. It is high critical for us to get in there and fell the trees. Priority 2 really should be, her suggestion is that to be done this fall. I learned something. You can't cut ash in the heat of the summer. If you cut ash in the heat of the summer, it literally explodes, just pops and explodes. It's very hazardous. So you have to wait until cooler temperatures in order to cut ash. So the priority would be to get that done over the fall timeframe, which does give us time to be able to identify that landing zone, hopefully get that landing pad established, and then look at contracting with the forester to be able to, or the logger to go in and be able to do that. I will say that we've done RFPs on this and gotten zero response. We have reached out to a number of foresters and harvesters on this and gotten zero response. And the reason why is everybody's really, really busy. That's what we've gotten, hands down, incredibly busy. But that being said, the inventorying is only going to be about $1,500, so well below any requirement for us to go out to bid on. And even if we decide that we need to have the harvester come in and just fell the trees because we don't have enough safety equipment in order to be able to do that safely with our crews or enough crews to do that, the cost for doing that is likely under $5,000. So we would still be in good shape. We won't know the value of the ash until we get the inventory completed and we know how many linear boards we have in there in order to be able to go for sale, and then what the market is. It's like a daily market fluctuation for ash boards. So that'll really depend on what that market is at that time. But they're right now speculating that would more than offset the cost of investment that we're doing right now and largely pay, if not all pay for the forest management plan for that area. We then subsequently discussed that this is kind of space one, and that we will have we have other open spaces that we would want to go and do forest management plans. None of them are to the extent of decay that this one is in, but clearly there will be management that has to happen on those, and they were open for that future conversation. So that was a really healthy and good conversation that we had with them, and I feel like we really came out with some really good actionable steps to move forward, some of which we may be able to tackle in-house, some of which we will need to contract for. But I am moving forward right now with contracting for that inventorying step to happen. So that way we can get a scope of work to be able to determine what we would potentially look for a harvester on that, and understand better what that impact would be. Any questions on forest management?
Just real quick, the infestation of the ashes, emerald ash borers?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, they're coming up this way rapidly.
Yep, emerald ash borer.
Now, and just a comment to the issue with the white ash is one of the very few woods that you do not have to season. It has very, very low moisture content. That is why you don't want to cut white ash when it's hot, when it's been hot for an extended period of time.
Yep.
Now, and then also too, if we're just felling trees, I would be very concerned with town staff, because if you're just dropping trees, you start creating hazards if you're leaving the trees without pulling them out. When you're dropping other trees, because if you've got a tree down and you have another tree that hits it, you have no idea where it's going. I've seen it happen where trees change direction, end up somewhere where you definitely didn't intend for them to end up.
That's why we're looking at having our crews that have been professional, they've done that for a living, go in there and look at it. We would not put somebody in place that is not accustomed to felling trees at a commercial level. So that's why it's those key staff that have to go in and look. So again, I rely heavily on their professional knowledge. They are, some of them still do some side work of their own with regards to trees, and that's great. But again, I rely on their professional opinion as to whether or not they have the safety protocol in place in order to be able to do it. So they'll be going out there in the next week or so to be able to start analyzing it and get their own eyes on it to really get a feel for what's there. And if they feel in the capacity that they're in here, they could manage that. It's a large scale area. This is not a small space, it's a large scale area. But when you're felling the trees, again, if you're used to doing it on a commercial basis, you can kind of cook through, because you're just dropping them. It's not like you're having clearly you have to manage some of that timber, but you're not necessarily having to do, and you're not taking off the tops, and you're not, taking off limbs and stuff like that. Actually, it's recommended that all of that get left intact because it provides a better reforestation of the area, as opposed to stripping the limbs off of and leaving just, solid logs. So, we have to look at all of that. We're looking at in concert with the harvester as well as the forester, so that way we can better make sure that we're making the best decision moving forward.
One other question. I know State of Connecticut's had programs in place before where individuals could get firewood off of state park. I believe it was a lottery process in order to do that. Is that something we could look into? As far as if any of this, like the dead and dying oak, I'm sure there's some value to people who are using it for, okay.
It's not valuable. It cannot be used for firewood.
It's that far gone.
It's really not. We talked about whether or not it would be, usable for firewood. We don't want to encourage people to go into that space and area, as well as it's, according to the forester and the harvester, it is just too far gone. It is not usable for firewood at this point in time. So, some of the ash that is been more significantly impacted, we kind of have like a, not all of it was impacted at once. It's kind of a staged. Some of that and some of the other wood in this phase 2 might be able to be firewood, but that's all part of that merchantability.
Thank you, that's all I had.
So going forward, Reynolds Street, I'm sure you've probably all seen kind of where they're at with that. We're in the process of reconstructing the retaining walls over by the Westfield Congregational Church. The main retaining wall was the support wall for the sidewalk. So as we replaced the sidewalk, that support wall also had to be replaced. We would have had to turn the corner into the other retaining walls that then returned towards the building of the Westfield Congregational. The church opted to have those replaced. There was one that was where the sidewalk was in the middle that went to their middle door. That portion of their retaining wall was bowing pretty substantially. And we had significant concerns about having to even try and tie into that bowing retaining wall. So it has actually worked out well for the project. We're not trying to chase crumbling. And honestly, once we got into the retaining walls, it was determined that the facade of them was a fieldstone wall. The interior of them was just a pile of a bunch of different rocks. It was like rubble underneath it, which is not uncommon for that time period. They just filled the void with what they had. And so it would have been challenging to tie into that for a concrete poured retaining wall. So that has worked out well. Our crew, the contractor, has been working very closely with the church, and the church has been fantastic about altering their activities during this heavy construction time period. But the church is incurring the cost for the retaining walls that are directly related onto their property. We did run into, when we removed the retaining wall with the sidewalk to the middle door, we did uncover damage that they had to a beam, one of the large beams within the building itself. They have been very quick to get out engineers and look at that, because once we we don't have to tie into that portion of the structure at all. Once we pour a concrete retaining wall, it will make it infinitely harder for them and far more expensive for them to address the decayed beam. So this will help them be able to get that done in a relatively short period of time. We have enough other portions of that retaining wall that we have to address. So we do have some space and time for them to be able to address that piece. But we're well underway with that. Once we are completed, which should be within the next few weeks, once completed, we will then go through repaving. We are going to be repaving all the way Reynolds Street from Main Street all the way to Gauthier. So it's the whole length of Reynolds Street. The space between Reynolds and Broad, we're trying to time it because Connecticut Water is going to be doing some of their water main work on the upper part of Reynolds Street. So we're trying to time it so that way, it's, the whole section is just paved all at once. It'd be just so much more efficient to start at Main and go all the way to Gauthier, or vice versa, rather than, one piece and then one piece. So we're trying to hopefully time that appropriately with the other work that's being done. But once we get to the point where the road is fully reopened, it will be formally recognized as a one-way street going from Main Street to Broad Street. The parking on the park side of it has been redesigned where it will be angled parking. It will be able to fit more parking spaces than what we were previously seeing. And also, the travel lane of the road will be far less impaired. With parking on both sides of the street, narrowed that road significantly and really made it challenging for people to pass in both directions at the same time anyway. This really will allow for much better flow for parking, pedestrian traffic, and regular vehicular traffic. Both sidewalks will be replaced on both sides of the street. So we're coming to the end or nearing the finish line on that one. Lastly, I did include for you, we recently had Wright Pierce complete a capacity analysis of the wastewater treatment plant. And I attached that report. We're reviewing that with our attorneys, both Rich and Ken Slater, also Ann Catino on the environmental side, to review what steps or what impacts this may have for, future applications through planning and zoning or for future connections to the WPCA. But that essentially, we're looking at the wastewater treatment plant is essentially at its treatment capacity. That doesn't mean that it's at its flow capacity, but at its ability to treat the matter that is being currently sent to it. And so, as you're aware, last year we applied for congressional delegation funds at the federal level. Murphy did proceed with submitting for $31 million. We were unsuccessful in that, but we have resubmitted again this year, for congressional designation funds. And again, you being able to utilize this capacity study analysis is helpful in being able to demonstrate the need for that, because again, this impacts not just Killingly, but also impacts Brooklyn at the same time. And what do we have as far as being able to manage both communities? So I wanted to make sure that you guys received a copy of that report as well. And then Westfield Avenue renovation, that is going very well right now. We got bids, so we have completed the bidding process for phase 2 of this renovation project, which is really, we only have 2 phases to this project. So this is the bulk of the construction and renovation of the interior of the structure. Project and the bids came in very, very favorable. We have a projected savings of just over $4.4 million on this, so really positive. With that savings, we had previously discussed through this project replacing the heating system. That was not originally part of the renovation project, because when we were doing the scoping of that, it was relayed to us that the heating system was in adequate condition. While we all knew that it was aged, it was in adequate condition. After subsequent evaluation, after we've dug through the design on this and spent a lot more time in that facility, the bones of the heating system is really reaching the end of its useful life. And so we'll never get it cheaper to replace the heating system now. So we're looking to have get authorization from the Permanent Building Commission to at least have the heating system designed. That will tell us whether or not $4.4 million is going to be sufficient to redo that heating system. It depends. And, we're not 100% committed that will be sufficient in order to be able to redo it, because it's not just replacing the boiler, it's replacing all of the piping, and it's converting it from a steam system to a hot water system. That's completely different formulation and a different equipment. So we really would like to be able to get that evaluation done. The last Permanent Building Commission, Kevin was there with that one. Members really expressed a desire to just get some feedback from the town council. While this project has been given to them for them to do, and they have the full ability to manage the entire budget, they just prefer to have some feedback from the town council as to the desire to replace the heating system. again, we could, not replace the heating system, and we're going to pay a lot for heating costs from a very inefficient system, and we're going to be chasing breaks consistently throughout the entire building. Or we can, while we're already under renovation, muckle it in for, a phase 3 and get the heating system replaced and design all of that work so we're minimizing any impact to any existing renovation that's already happening. We kind of have that very narrow window right now that we can get this all incorporated. And I think that saves a lot of costs to the community overall. So just they were looking for eventually some feedback. They don't necessarily, the town council doesn't need to take a formal vote on this because you've already voted to send that project to them. They already have that full capacity to do that, but they did want to get feedback from the council on that.
Mary, can I just ask, so how did we go, so in the initial, plan and details, and so it was determined we didn't need a heating system?
Correct,
Or
when we were-
was it taken out of the design for cost saving? It was not supposed to be done.
Right, when we were originally looking at it back in 2019, we did not have a heating system in there. The focus was cooling. The boiler itself was converted from oil to natural gas in about 2012. And we weren't getting any reports of, ongoing or chronic problems with the infrastructure of the piping and stuff like that, right? So, we didn't pursue that avenue. We were concerned about cost, right? Because we knew that, in 2019, the cost that was originally presented, I know that I had concerns around some of that, which is why we went with a different company, with a different architecture firm to do the revisit of that 18 months later, because the first firm they weren't really hearing what the project needed to be. And so we had concerns around what those costs were. And when we revisited it, obviously we also had, market impacts, market stress for materials that dramatically changed cost. And so we really went into it with, and the communication had always been at the time was, we're doing what needs to be done to the envelope of the building to address the ongoing fire and building code concerns from the fire and building perspective, make it watertight, and then deal with what needs to be done in order to put the community center in there. So it was a very limited scope as to what was actually, it wasn't like a renovate is new for the entire building, right? That never was the intent of this. And so the heating system at the time was viewed as adequate at the time. We knew it was overall an aging infrastructure, but not in any critical condition. As we continued, once we got the project approved and we moved into full design phase, we had greater access to the tunnel areas. And that is where we really started to be concerned around what we were recognizing there. We also found, in the backstage area, there's some rotting floorboards where you can see steam literally coming up. We weren't able to test the remaining lights in the theater at this point, because where the steam is coming out from is right at that electrical component. So we would, nobody wants to make that go live until all of that is addressed. So we kind of held and said, all right, we know going in this, at this point in time, we know that, we're going to have to wait and see where everything lands. And so we didn't want to start going down the road of designing and spending a lot of project costs on design for a system that we didn't know if we really didn't think that we were going to have funding for. We were still being very cautiously told by, both Downs and Antonazi that, market pressures were still going to be very strong. I think part of the response that we've gotten is part of the savings that we're seeing is because the KMS project is going to be wrapping up, and they're going to essentially be just rolling their, so we got really good bids and really good price points from existing vendors that are rolling from the KMS project. So that has actually worked in our favor by doing both projects, essentially very close to the same time period. That has really actually worked out well for us. So with the strong savings that we have, it's very feasible for us to look at replacing a heating system and incorporating that now in the design and making those modifications as we go along. It would be a phase 3, so we would get through a large bulk of the construction, but we'd be able to identify those areas that has to get held off on because we're going to be going in with new heating, right? And so it would help us not have to duplicate efforts and waste additional time and money.
Thank you.
Would that go out to bid, the
Yes.
heating system? So
Yes.
it wouldn't be the sole contractor that you have now? It'll go out
No,
to
it would
bid.
have to be, the design, we have to do the design first, and then that design would lead to construction documents that would then be bid out.
Okay,
So it would be fully bid.
thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
So I don't know what everybody's thoughts are with regards to that, but just,
So, how soon are you looking for, or how soon is Permanent Building looking for direction on this? Do we have time to set this for an agenda item on a
I would
subsequent
put it on the
meeting, or-
4th, or if you can give me just a consensus idea as to whether or not you have, I mean, we are right now just looking at getting design done, because again, we're not 100% positive that we have enough funding. I would be able to come back to you with saying, this is how much we believe that is estimated for the heating system. So then you would be able to have another conversation. But I know that they're looking at their next meeting to potentially consider funding at least the design of it, which is about $80,000 to do the design.
Well, my opinion is the fact that we appropriated a certain amount and we're coming in substantially under budget. We're staying within what was appropriated for the project, and if we can incorporate the heating system in as well and still stay within what was appropriated, I would definitely be in favor of that.
Yeah, if we stayed within, yeah.
Especially considering, as Mr. Way had asked, that it's actually gonna go out to bid, it isn't just gonna be.
Oh, yeah, no. It'd be fully bid. That would have to be fully bid. So I will at least share that consensus, and obviously, you would want to know what the final estimation is,
Yeah.
and all that, and I will keep you apprised of that, but we'll be able to at least share with the Permanent Building Commission that there's interest at least in looking at potentially replacing that system while the building's going to be open, while we're going to be tearing into this.
The other piece I think about too is if we don't do this now, and it's something we will have to do down the road, that the cost, I'm sure, would escalate substantially, because
It always does.
now you're getting back into something that's just been done.
I've never seen costs go down, really. It's so rare. Like, I look back at the 3rd and 4th floor for this building, where they had cost estimates in the 80s of like under $100,000, and now we're looking at like $4 million, right? Like, it just never goes down.
Any other comments? Okay. All right. Seeing no more comments, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is 14, unfinished business for town council action. We have none this evening, so we'll now move on to item 15A, council discussion and guidance on the establishment of a vision committee.
So this item is for discussion only, for guidance. I had included in your report, in your packet, a rather large handbook You know, I looked for a number of resources around a visioning committee. A lot of my counterparts throughout Connecticut, they've really done council goal settings, steering committees, council steering committees, that type of thing. So really, this document I felt really kind of chunked out and gave, you know, kind of some thoughts at least around, you know, what would a visioning committee's charge be. I did provide with you a draft, you know, so the draft that I have for the sample only of an ordinance. So you would create an ordinance that, yes, you would hold a public hearing on at some point in time before, as any ordinance, you hold a public hearing before you act on it. But it really, you know, talks about establishing what does this temporary commission look like. And so listening to what you guys had outlined in the in your goal setting session, I kind of started to use that to kind of piece together some of these things. So like, you know, I started out with a 7-member special commission. You know, sometimes when you get a really large commission, it becomes unruly as to, you know, how and, you know, kind of the direction and path, and also making sure you have quorum, right? So I started with a 7-member, and I had the commission sunset on June 30th of 2026. That could always be extended. The council in previous special commissions have extended them when they felt the desire to do so. I did put, as in addition to the regular members, ex officio would be the town manager, which means I would participate but not have any voting powers or anything like that. It would be the visioning. Very much how I am with the Permanent Building Commission. You know, I sit at the table, but I'm not a voting person. And then just kind of what would the outline be of those members, right? So I heard, you know, potentially the council. One of the things that I saw in some of the other towns that have done steering or community type engagements, they had 2 members from the council, one from each party, one from majority and one from minority party. So that way both views were represented. You know, trying to recognize that there's some desire to look at, you know, vision around development and growth while not trying to replicate the POCD, right? That's going to be a fine dance. You know, do you have somebody from economic development? Do you have somebody from planning and zoning? And then 3 members from just the general citizens at large, whatever those look like, right? Again, all of that can get changed. These were just spitballing ideas out there for you to kind of look at. And then, you know, kind of, you know, but clearly the members would have to, the membership of this would have to meet minority representation, right? So there would have to be still the balance of political parties or representation on this. So minority representation would have to be considered in this. And then for duties, you know, I kind of not sure, you know, when I was going through looking at what do you want for duties, you know, I think that would be helpful for guidance as to kind of what are your primary goals for this visioning committee. Several of my counterparts around the state that have been involved with more robust council or steering committees, they actually recommended the council consider looking at hiring an outside consultant to come in and work as a moderator for this. Not that they were a person that actually, you know, defined any of it, but just to assist in, you know, creating that public engagement and trying to, you know, bring in public engagement, setting up, you know, surveys or, you know, different tools for that type of soliciting of that engagement, as well as, you know, assisting the committee itself in trying to kind of vet through the various different ideas or concepts without replicating the POCD as well. So again, that was just a recommendation that was presented to me. All of that is up for your consideration. But when we got down to the actual, short-term and long-term goals, it's easy to say, establish short-term and long-term goals of the community, but goals of what? I mean, we have economic, we have housing, which largely a lot of those are in our POCD as well. But we also have, you could take the avenue of branding, right? As many communities do, a branding visioning committee where, how do we define ourselves as a community? What's our taglines? What's is that logo a representation of the town? Have we changed from that? What's our priorities for how we're defining ourselves as a community? So many different avenues to take. And so I'm kind of looking for guidance on what you want to see in the primary goals and tasks so they can, have something that they're working towards.
So, I mean, there's a lot, and I've given this a lot of thought over a lot of years. And I know we have the POCD, so as you brought up, we don't want to be duplicating that and, in a sense, stepping on what the town's already gone forward and done. And the branding is definitely one big piece that I had thought about is what is Killingly? How do we see ourselves? How do we want others to see us? And I really believe branding is a big thing. And one of the things is ways to figure out ways to bring in whether it's more foot traffic in downtown, more people to for recreation areas, and I've got a million things rattling in my head right now. I'm trying to just sort them all out. What direction we want to see Killingly going forward? As far as development, and as far as, and I know that's the thing that's tough, is it's trying to make sure this is separate from what the POCD did. But the biggest thing is if we don't know, and I thought the long-term goal, short-term, and midterm is for as far as a constabulary is something that could almost get rolled into this, to where is getting input from the community as far as not just where the council wants to see this going, but where the community itself wants to see it going as well. Absolutely.
That when I think about this is what Killingly is to me is community.
Mm-hmm.
So Killingly has a very robust, tight-knit community feel. There's a lot of organizations, there's different churches, there are different youth groups. Everyone works together really well to put on town events, to when someone, has a problem, people rally around them, support them. We're a growing town, but we're a small community, if that makes sense. And I think when you look at like economic development, how many businesses have come in recently? They're coming here because we're a very welcoming town. And I think through, and not to bring up specific things, but over the past 4 or 5 years, our reputation has been tarnished terribly by certain small groups. But we can get past that if we work together. Yeah. We need to be able to come to the table and work together. So we have a very strong economic development team. We have a very strong business association. We have a very strong library community. Like they have homeschool groups. They work very closely with the schools. The town and the schools, we are working better to get to that point. But I think the vision committee, the commission, has to involve all these different sectors within the town. And I think the way we do that is to put the word out to the entire community and say, we need your support with this. And you're as much a part of this as we are. Yeah. So the branding is very important. but I think we're already a very tight-knit community, and we're an amazing little village. That's how I feel. You know, when they have like fundraisers, and when the Elks do rides, and when they have dinners, and, you know, all the different VFWs, all the different veterans events, people come together. And this is what we need to focus on. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Comments?
I would just say, I mean, I'm not sure what we're supposed to be doing tonight, because it is late, that we should table something at some point, like a real decision, like I'm not sure what we're doing here. My thoughts on the draft is, for me, the focus would be on gathering the information, like the little sects, whatever they come to be, would have to be little spokespeople for larger groups so that we really knew what was going on. But I don't know, what are we doing tonight with this, Mary?
It's,
Yeah, go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
basically tonight is just to get the discussion rolling, and right now, it isn't like there's an item on the agenda to put this ordinance out. This is kind of just us getting the ball rolling, as far as what we want this to look like, what we want to be included in this. I definitely wish we had a little bit more response from the public as far as how they feel this would go, because that's one thing that, when I think of a vision committee, I think of it being not so much the council, not so much staff, but the community itself.
100%. And so in terms of the groups, those all look nice. Like there's nothing I would object to there. But I would like to get like some farmers on it maybe, and conservation, open space. Like, I feel like what happens here, the people that actually, you know, that vote and come out and or whatever, is really small. And there's this huge portion of the population that really just wants to kind of hang out in the woods and raise the kids or whatever. Like, I'd like some way to churches, I don't know what it is, to include, to get that voice here.
Sure.
So that it isn't just the same voices that we see all the time. Sure. Because we know when we really go out, you know, if we knock on doors or we do volunteer and you go and do Wreaths Across America, who are all those people? Yay! You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they don't come to these things, so
Yeah,
whatever this is, I don't know how to make that happen.
yeah, and
But
That's District 3.
Exactly, like we need a District 3 rep. Oh, historical, I was thinking would be one of it. Because a lot of times historical society, they just wanna, they know those roots and they know those people and I'm not sure how to make that
Well,
group
those
appear
could
here.
easily be the community members too,
Right, right.
if they own a historical property.
the other thing I thought about too is have members from Historical Society, Ag Commission, Conservation, come before and meet with the Visioning Committee. So it's not, because the one thing I thought about is, we do want to bring as many people, get as many people from the community involved in this as possible. But at what point do you get to where you've got too many members and nothing's really getting accomplished? Whereas if you were to have more involvement from different groups individually, where, all right, we're gonna have, the Vision Committee's gonna have a meeting, and they're gonna be meeting with this commission and this commission this night to get input from them, and then have another meeting later on, weeks, month later, whatever it is, with another group to,
The spokespeople for those people.
yes,
Yeah.
so.
I agree with that, not having them all together, like you're working with a certain group and their interests.
Yeah, to bring, so basically, I guess the way I look at the Vision Committee is, I would love for the council to have enough time for us to go out and
Right,
reach
we
out and
don't.
do all of
We
this. However, what I look at the visioning committee is an entity that can reach out and engage different groups.
100%. I only said that because if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't really have that knowledge of what is really out there. We only see what's here. So, but you're absolutely right. We do not have the time, and that is exactly what we need. That
and the-
overall broad voice here.
I think one of the things kind of goes along with what Patty said. I can't tell you how many times over the years I have had coworkers over the years that, well, ask Tammy, she knows what's going on in town. I mean, if there was like a central, even a kiosk somewhere where, let's say the VFW is doing planned dinners or planned fundraisers, that they could have a kiosk somewhere that somebody can, while you, I don't know, when you're at the library waiting, different places where they could put these, so that people actually, oh, wow, look at this, is what's going on. I mean, we go on Winnie Radio and we talk once a month, and I mean, we have an hour. We could easily take the whole 2 hours if we really wanted to. There's just a lot going on in town. I mean, I almost wonder sometimes if it would be even having like our parks, because everybody talks about our parks. So what's what parks are out there, and what can you do in the parks? What kind of sports teams are there? Community sports teams, and there are a lot of groups, and I think we need to find a way to kind of loop everybody in. I mean, I don't mind telling everybody what's going on, but I mean, they shouldn't be coming to me. I feel the real resource out there.
I think it's a tough balance, because everybody wants, tell Matt I'm sorry, but everybody wants Lexington here, but Lexington comes with a price, you know what I mean? And tell them I'm sorry, but it's the truth, you know what I mean? We all want everything perfect. We want the most beautiful parks. We want the best roads. We want everything. So I think it's harder. Not saying it's harder than, well, yeah, it's harder than, at least I think, to make that balance. Do we want industry that comes in that only pays, that doesn't pay a living wage? Do we want that to come in? Do we, it's the world is changing, so it's a whole different ideal, I mean, the budget was voted down because people are, high taxes and, whatnot, and people can't afford this, So it's hard. It's really hard. It's a weighing, it weighs on you.
All of that's true. I wouldn't even agree that everyone wants Lexington. I
I'm
don't
just
want,
using that as
I
a-
don't want Lexington. I want my forest and my
Yeah, no,
animals
Lexington's beautiful.
with the trees falling down and stuff.
So on page 14 of that toolbook, of that handbook, it does have some like commonly addressed issues, just as thoughts, simply just as thoughts. And like what I'm hearing is, community image, tourism, branding, recreation opportunities, right? But those are just some ideas. But again, if you take that whole list and put it into what your visioning committee, they'll get nothing done, right? So, what are your top, you can start out with, here's your top priority, and then once they achieve whatever that is, you can add the next layer, right? I would say you want to have some sort of a focus initially on where, what vision are you looking for them to solve? What concern is it that you're looking for them? What avenue are you looking for them to start exploring? Because there's, as you can see on that page, there's so many and they're so diverse, you can get lost in that, right? And again, you also can, kind of cross over with POCD as well. But, just the few that I heard tonight were kind of, those were the top 4 that seem to, continue to come up. But so again, this was just I can add some more draft to this, put it on your June 11th meeting for your, continued deliberation and discussion around what you want to see. You could also take this and send it to your ordinance subcommittee, for ordinance subcommittee to do some tooling on it as well. But given that it was a council initiative, I wanted to just bring it to the council as a whole instead of going to ordinance subcommittee first. I kind of wanted to get the direction from the entire group.
The one thing that I keep racking my brain with is trying to think of different, more creative ways to engage the community, to get more people interested in something like this. And I know social media is one way, but and the one thing that I keep thinking about is the coffee with the town council, just something on a weekend to engage with the community. It's very time consuming to go knocking doors. It really is. All of us here know how much time that takes up. But if we could have something where, and that was why I threw out the idea of coffee with the council, is one or two of us in somewhere other than here, where we're engaging the public, not in the town hall, to try and bolster the desire for people to get involved, to, in a sense, be more approachable. And I think if by doing that, it may help get more input from the public for something like this, the visioning committee.
And with regards to that, I know Ashley's been trying to kind of get an idea of availability. I know some have responded to her with availability for something like that. Once we know availability, then we can start ironing down kind of where and trying to develop what that schedule might look like. And so I'll be trying to, kind of work through that. But if you haven't gone back to her with what availability you might have to do something like that, that would be helpful, just so we can kind of start slotting in what that might look like and trying to figure out frequencies.
I think one suggestion would be just get out in the community.
Yeah.
I mean, there's events pretty much every weekend somewhere. There's, I attend a lot, but I mean, I do a lot too. I always have, and I'm from here, so I know a lot of the different things that happen all the time. But there's so many different events that all of us, or some of us, could just attend. And you get out there and talk to people. It's not necessarily knocking doors and political. It's getting out in the community and meeting with people. New businesses have been coming in for how long now? Stop in and just, say hi. It's pretty simple. We just have to do that. And then maybe when we do that, we'll get more people to engage.
I think, though, and I only mentioned knocking doors because it gave me insight, not because I think that's what we need to do. But I think there are event-oriented people, and then there are people that are oriented to just staying home with their family, with their neighbors, who really aren't. And so then you don't get those people. You only get the event people. So I'd like to figure out a way to get those people who like to just kind of, some of it is non-engagement, but some of it, they just have a different view of how they want to live. If I didn't do this, where I'd be on my porch tonight, like totally content, and there's
So-
many, many people like that.
So do you think that's part of the issue, though? Like, you're not going to get those people because they don't
No, I
want to
think that,
engage, or do you think you will?
I don't think you're going to get them necessarily to an event, but you might get a spokesperson who can organize them so that they have a voice in this. I'm not sure how to do that, but if you don't, you end up with the event-oriented people, who like to come out to the things and the tight-knit, whatever. But there's this huge portion of the community that really doesn't like to do that. So how do you get that voice included?
I don't even think it's that they don't like to do it. I think there's so many people in the community that work so much that
Yeah,
they don't
same
have
thing.
time to do it.
Same
You know,
thing.
it's
I don't
that
like to do it.
that
but yeah,
knock on
same
the
thing.
door is a good engagement to them. But like you said, get out. And I'm bad for that. Get out and go to the functions.
Now, here's one thought I had too, as far as, could a visioning committee meet somewhere other than the town hall room? Could they meet
Of
at,
course.
whether it's the
Yep.
library or
Meet anywhere.
the high school? Okay.
Meet anywhere.
Because
We
that's
just
one
gotta
thing
we just gotta post an agenda and a location. That's it.
Because that's the one thing I think about it is, and I know Ed's brought it up many times, where people talk to him, they talk to me, but they don't want to come up there and speak.
Oh,
It's
sure.
something about, it's almost like they don't want to be in the town hall. I don't know if it's because this is where they got to come to pay their taxes. And
I
it
will
gives
say
them-
that some people are very intimidated to just come to the microphones because they know we're live streaming. And that is intimidating. They know that they're going to be up on a social media, or they're going to be, people can, go back and re-listen, right? I've gotten that feedback from people, so that they don't want to go to the microphones because they know that we're streaming, right? And again, that's their viewpoint, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's why when I've done public information meetings, like around like trash pickup and stuff like that, I usually go to the library. I usually try to go to other locations rather than here, just because it's a more informal setting, and people tend to be more comfortable and more willing to have a conversation because it's a more relaxed environment, and it doesn't feel so formal. So yeah.
So I just want to verbalize this, just because I don't think I'm speaking it clearly about the event thing. It's not necessarily you want to make people event-oriented who aren't. It's that you don't, if you're not that type of person, it doesn't mean you don't want to see your voice and how your community is formed. So that's what I mean. So we're not necessarily going to get everyone to events or whatever. Some people, they're not kind of oriented that way, but they still want a voice. So if that's clearer.
But you might meet those people at the library.
Oh,
Right.
all the ideas are good. I'm
So
just
you-
saying that.
You might see them in alternate locations
Yeah.
that aren't necessarily tied to an
Supermarket,
event,
anything.
but, something like that.
The
yeah.
hoedown.
And then something that I thought of when you're talking about that is the people that don't go to events. They are busy, like Andy said, and they're home, raising families or whatever it is. Exactly. One possible way to reach out to them would be if we could price out doing a EDDM or a mass mailing, where when we're doing this, we send something out so everybody, and I know a lot of times you get that postcard and what's the first thing you do? Recycle bin. No, not garbage, recycle bin is paper. But I mean, that would be a way to try and reach those people that aren't out at events. And the thing I thought about too is similar to the Coffee with the Council. If we were to go to local businesses and ask them, can we set up, we're gonna be doing a visioning committee, can we set up a table this day for this amount of hours and try and engage with people, whether it's at something like Aldi's or Stop and Shop, where people gotta go buy food, so they might not go to an event at the park, but you might get people that are out on a weekend going to do the grocery shopping, that otherwise they're too busy during the week to come here, but that way we can try and reach more people, get as many people involved, and get as much interest from the community as we can.
So Mary, are you looking like a suggestion where the next step to take this, like sending it
So-
on to ordinance?
Well, so yeah, what I'm looking for is, do you want to have me revise? I'm really looking at trying to fill out the section around what is the long-term, short-term goals? What is the composition of this? Is 7 what you think is an adequate number, right? I would revise this draft. I would be looking for the council to tell me whether or not you want to send this to ordinance subcommittee for ordinance subcommittee to kind of try and work through some of the finer details, and then bring back the revised ordinance to the council as a whole. Do you want me to just revise this and bring this back to your next June meeting for further discussion, and the council work on it as a whole, before you get to, actually establishing?
I would think we take what you gave us already and just regurgitate that in our own self and maybe put some notes on it or whatever, and yeah, a little more time to look at it and just review it and just send it back and maybe,
That's fine. I mean, I can
By the
revise
June-
this to add in, because I didn't have what those long-term and short-term goals were going to be, because I didn't know what your, kind of really what your primary focuses are. So I would look to include kind of these initial 4 that you have there as kind of the primary first point or first starting place for a visioning committee to start their focus on. And then I'll bring it back to you as a revision for next month. You guys can decide whether or not you want more retooling or you're ready to proceed forward.
And I think for the number of people, that maybe at least one person from each district as a representative.
How many did we have when we did the law enforcement one? Was there 4 community members?
I would have to go back. I think you might have had 4. That one might have been a
I
9-member
think there was
commission.
I know there was a town council and then 2 from public safety, I think.
Mhm.
I think if you did it district-wise too, then you'd kind of have to do percentage of population. And every district does have a very different flavor, but I think 3 is the biggest. Do you know what I mean? So maybe they would get 2 or something like that, or.
It's just the biggest in area.
Oh, okay, not
Not
the
in
area.
population. All
I'm
the
talking
populations are very
population.
similar in
Yeah,
size.
population.
Yeah, they're all divvied up by population.
And maybe that's bad. I think if Mary's going to come back with something, then we should read this and send our ideas to her before that, so that she has some new material.
What I would recommend is that you just send it to me. Don't try and send it to the council as a whole.
Yes, don't make
Yeah.
my
Yep.
common mistake.
Yep. Well, then at that point, if you're sending it to the council as a whole, it's an illegal
That's what I
meeting.
said, my common mistake that I do every single time.
Now, I do have one question as far as minority representation. How does having a member of EDC and Planning Zoning Commission, how does that affect minority representation? How would that fall in there?
It doesn't, you just have to make sure that that there's a balance.
Okay,
So you can't, everybody on the committee can't be Republican
yep,
or can't
yep.
be completely Democrat. You
Yep.
have to have yeah, it has to be a mix.
okay, all right.
Yeah, I would think Parks and Rec is just part of
Again, these were, I spitballed and
this
just
was-
threw
yeah.
stuff out there.
Yeah.
You can completely change those commissions entirely and decide that you want it to, especially if you're gonna be looking at branding and, recreation opportunities and community image, maybe those aren't the ones that you're looking at, right? I don't know.
I think we should look at identity too, as a community, because people really have a different idea of who we are and where we're going. I mean, that's the whole big argument about the branding school thing. Like, what is our identity and who do we want to be?
We're an awesome little village, and we have been for how many years, Tammy? Over 300.
Mm.
And we've been here how many
1708.
generations? 4?
4 years shy of 300.
Just, if that's where people are, make sure that's where everyone is. Because we have the whole redneck thing. I mean, not redneck, the whole Redmen thing. The whole Redmen thing, and that was a big thing saying, that was a big division in the community. And so to me, that's an identity thing, like some people feeling really proud in that heritage and other people not. So when they came out and said, we need a consultant, and it's branding, I don't actually think it's about what we're putting out. I think that we have division about who we actually are.
Well, yeah, I'm going to reserve my comments on that. We're trying to get past that controversy. We want to bring people together, not bring that up again.
No, I'm not
So
saying that.
that's
I'm
what
just,
we wanna
I'm,
get away
again,
from.
I'm only using that as an example of there's differences of who we are to some people. And so, yeah.
So that's what I have as community image. What is our,
But one is what we feel and what is what we put out.
sure.
Send Mary all our ideas.
So, I have a bunch of ideas at this point in time. If you have any other specific ideas around the makeup of members as well as duties, I'll collaborate that all together, and then it'll come up as a revised one on your June 11th.
All right. Any more comments, discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is 15B, consideration and action on a resolution to authorize the town manager to execute the letter of agreement for the establishment of a multi-jurisdictional shelter. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
I'll
Motion.
second it.
Motion is made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Mr. Cottula. Ms. Gloria, could you go over this?
Sure, so this is really being driven by, so this is with regards to our Region 4 DEMIS. Red Cross has communicated for many years that in an emergency situation for a regional emergency, think like hurricane impact or something like that, they will really only be able to support standing up one emergency shelter for emergency for that component, which that means that they basically staff it, they operate it, they run it, and so the region was looking at identifying a multi-jurisdictional shelter. That's going to be Plainfield High School. It does not preclude Killingly from opening our own shelter. We can open our own shelter. It just means that we're opening it with our own staff, which is what we have traditionally done anyway. We've not had a Red Cross implementation here in Killingly. So this agreement is just that we're signing on, that we will be a community that participates in that multi-jurisdictional. It would potentially alleviate the town from, if we have continuing effects in which sheltering may still need to be required. One of the primary goals during an emergency is to get your schools reopened and get your kids back to school. Our community shelter is KIS. That prevents that school from opening. This would allow us to be able to potentially, if Red Cross has got an activated multi-jurisdictional shelter, Killingly residents would be able to go there, and we would potentially be able to activate KISS back into school operations on a sooner basis. That was one of the challenges that we had with Irene when Hurricane Irene came through. We had needs for shower services, charging stations, potable water, that type of stuff. But we also needed to get kids back. We needed kids to get into school, to start school too, to be able to provide that normalcy while we were still dealing with widespread power outages. So that was a balance. We were able to activate other resources in the community, like the community center, and after school hours, the high school, in order to be able to do showering. But it did become a bit of a challenge through that process. By having this as a potential resource that is also then staffed by Red Cross, that would alleviate some of that pressure from our own facilities. So again, it doesn't preclude us from utilizing our own emergency shelter services, and in some instances, you can't get there from here during a regional emergency. But it does mean that Red Cross would staff that one.
There's no financial impact to the town.
No financial impact to the town at all. Nope.
Discussion, comments?
Yes, this is going to be a weird question, but there's a lot of temporary shelter going up for illegals. It's a big thing all across the country at this point. This isn't for that, it seems like it, but it makes me a little nervous because I don't know too much about it. And if we agree to, be part of it, is it something we can get out of? If we see it being used in ways that we don't like.
Yeah, so this is strictly for regional emergency with regards to, major weather events or events in which your population can no longer stay in their homes, right? So major gas leak somewhere, right? But something significantly impacting the region, right? This is not for housing displaced immigrants from other locations. That's not what this emergency shelter is for. They would offline a public school so it's not for that. This is for when we have those hurricane events, tornado events, any of those type of events that would require us to have, people be leaving their homes. Flooding events, that they would have to leave their homes. That's what this is for. Can we get out of it? Yes, we can exit this at some point in time, at any point in time, if we choose that it's not fulfilling our needs.
Being that it's at the Plainfield High School, I don't see it affecting us, but I also can see, to your point, look at the schools in New York that were overrun when they had illegal immigrants coming in, bust in. They needed a place to put them, so that's all throughout the news, so it is a valid point.
During the rainy season too, because they had a nice place in the field, and then, it's too much rain, and then they had to displace the school. So that's just why
It also says in here, the supporting community shall share in the costs incurred by the host community if help is needed and requested.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So we all participate. It's the same as running our own shelters. But we don't pay into that. Red Cross runs the shelter.
But there can be a cost involved, so it's to the community.
We would have staff. It's the same as running our own shelter.
So the cost is only staff, like it came up and then we
Correct.
staffed, okay.
If we needed to send somebody to be able to assist in maintaining coverage or cleaning or something, we would provide
So
that.
whatever staff we would have been staffing in our own.
If we needed to.
And one of
It's
the
no
things-
different than what we're currently doing.
One of the things I did see was a municipal liaison, where either a paid or volunteer representative has got to be at the shelter from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Correct.
So I'm thinking if that's a paid staff, and at
Or it
11
could be
a.m. to
volunteer.
7 p.m. True. So I did see that. And then the one thing I did notice, and when I was looking over this, when it talks about event of a widespread emergency, there's no definition I could find anywhere in this that defines what a widespread emergency was.
Emergencies change.
So,
Define an emergency, define a
Yeah.
catastrophe,
yeah.
right? Define what that is.
And
Right.
that's what I
It's
think
like
of,
different
too.
shades of purple.
Right. We respond at a community level when we have a widespread impact.
But like it was mentioned, this is something where if we see this going a direction where we feel it shouldn't be, and there's a burden on Tillings taxpayers, that we feel it shouldn't be, then we can withdraw from that.
We just give 90 days written notice. That's it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is council member reports and comments. Mr. Whitehead, would you like to start? Thank you. Ms. Murphy?
It's all been budget. The Killingly WPCA was budget, 10% increase. School was all budget, so we're pretty much all no.
Thank you. Mr. Cottula?
Just what Mary had gone over in her town manager report with Westfield Avenue, just that.
Parks Rec Commission doesn't meet on the even month, so there was none in April. The one they were gonna have this month was tentatively scheduled for what is now the new reconvened town meeting. So, we'll probably have one maybe before the next. And like I said, the borough doesn't meet until tomorrow, so.
Thank you. I had none.
I have none.
I didn't attend the Housing Authority because I I had another meeting. From the planning and zoning, there was a workshop where we were discussing the planned residential development. We requested that the drafted regulations be resubmitted with redlined of what was being taken out, and the new regulations put in. There was a lot of controversy. We only got through the first page. There's supposed to be another session before the next planning and zoning meeting, but I don't see it on the town calendar. And otherwise, from the regular planning and zoning, there was just one new business for a 3-bay metal garage on 82 Putnam Pike, so that will be discussed next Monday on the 20th. And that's it.
Thank you. Moving on, executive session, and we have nothing. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Motion was made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Ms. Wakefield. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? This meeting is adjourned.